And welcome to tonight's meeting of Burnside Council. Please stand for the acknowledgements. Robert, the other couple, I've already spoken to that gentleman. Okay. We acknowledge that the land that we meet on today is the traditional land of the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the Kaurna people today. We also pay respect to the cultural authority of Aboriginal people visiting and attending from other areas of South Australia and Australia. On behalf of the City of Burnside, I gratefully acknowledge and pay respect to those who gave their lives for this country and its people. Please remain standing for the opening prayer. We pray for understanding and guidance in our debate as we make decisions that will impact on the lives of all those who reside, study, work in and visit the City of Burnside. Grant us wisdom as we serve our community. Please be seated. I welcome members in the gallery and ask them to observe in respectful silence as the Chamber deliberates on matters that relate to the City of Burnside. Should there be a fire or any other emergency, the alarm will sound and you are asked to follow directions of council staff. I need to remind all council meetings are live streamed through the City of Burnside website, and a copy of tonight's agenda is available by downloading from the website. I remind elected members of the importance of using their microphones appropriately so that those at home can hear clearly, and request all that in attendance switch their mobile phones off or on silent. Right, as far as I know, we have no apologies. Leave of absence, we have one formal request from Councillor Dawes. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Davis. Seconder, Councillor Hubel. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Councillor.
I also would like to request a leave of absence from the 6th to the 14th of July, inclusive for personal reasons, but sorry, I did not make it to the agenda because I was unwell for the last 3 weeks. So I just need a motion. Thank you, Councillor Davis, and seconded by Councillor Cornish. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 11th of June. Do I have a mover? Councillor Cornish, seconded Councillor Pickett. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. We have two deputations this evening, one from Mr and Mrs Robbins. So if I can invite you up, is it Robins or Robbins? Robins, sorry. Yes, please, to take those seats in the centre there. Are you both going to speak?
I'm going to read this.
All right.
Happy to answer questions, etc. afterwards. All right, so you have 5 minutes to deliver your deputation. There'll be a warning bell at 4 minutes, and then when you're finished, if you wouldn't mind being available to answer any questions that come from the elected members. Okay, now I'm going to turn my microphone off, and if you just press the button that says speak.
And I just wanted to check that everybody has the photos that I emailed through in front of them. Okay, that's fine. I think you've probably all seen photos of this house before anyway. So yeah, good evening. My husband and I, we live on Everard Street in Glen Osmond, and tonight we are here to discuss the state of the derelict property at number 14 Everard Street in Glen Osmond. At the council meeting on Tuesday the 9th of April, it was unanimously carried that council will increase the differential rating on vacant land to 200% as part of the consultation of the 2019-2020 annual business plan. Just wanted to know, is this property considered vacant land? The house has a massive hole in the roof, so isn't habitable whatsoever, and cannot be considered an improvement on the land. Derelict homes must be included in the rate increase, otherwise there is no incentive for the owners to complete demolition of this house. Last week, I had some hard rubbish collected. I was under strict instructions not to leave it on the curbside any earlier than 24 hours before collection. If 14 Everard Street is not considered vacant land, then surely it must be considered to be hard rubbish in accordance with the illegal dumping provisions under the Local Government Act 1999. Purchased in May 2015 for $600,000, the owners of 14 Everard Street appear to be land banking, having already had their development application lapse. Pine trees were cut down well before we purchased our property in 2017, with neighbours telling us the house had been like that for at least a year. Naively, we thought that it would soon be developed, given the signboard out the front with a "one sold" sticker. Here we are more than 2 years after moving in to Everard Street with no change. We have lived in 3 other councils: Tea Tree Gully, Port Adelaide Enfield, and most recently Campbelltown. I would have never expected a property like this to exist for so many years in Adelaide's premier council of Burnside. Every time someone comes to our house for the first time, they always say, "What happened over there?" with a horrified look on her face. It's out of our control, yet we can't help but feel embarrassed. Councillor Julian Carbone is just as outraged as us and has had numerous complaints about the state of the property from our neighbours. Aside from the derelict appearance, there are also safety concerns surrounding the state of the property. Each year the council requests they trim the dead weeds as it poses a fire risk, yet dried out pine trees are totally fine to stay as they are. As you can see in the photos, which I can resend them to you all, earlier this year I noticed an electronic scooter from the city parked out the front with an empty 6-pack of beer. There was a brown snake in our driveway heading towards number 14 in January this year, with the snake catchers telling me that the derelict house is our biggest problem. We have 3 young children, so now I'm on high alert whenever they play outside. Less than 2 weeks ago, a neighbour was approached in her car by a man who then ran across to number 14. Police were called, who sent a patrol car to the area. Aside from potential criminals using it to hide out, in its current state, it is also dangerous for anyone who enters. Does someone need to be killed for action to be taken? Now we have neighbouring homes whose properties values are lowered as a result, safety issues for the community, and an overall embarrassment for Burnside Council. We cannot let these property owners get away with leaving the site in this state. Something has to change. I want to finish by asking all of the councillors and Burnside Council staff in this room whether they would be happy living next door to this monstrosity. I don't think anyone would honestly say they'd be happy to look at this day in, day out. Thank you. Now we're ready for any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Carbone.
Brooke, that was a fantastic speech, so thank you very much. I was delighted in a sad way with everything that you said, because it brings home all the messages that I've been getting since the election about derelict property, so thank you very much. I do have a couple of questions, but yeah, I was very, very pleased with what you said. It is an embarrassment to the council area. You know, I'm even saddened to hear that it's becoming a hideout for criminals. I was not aware of that, so that's even worse. And you're right, asking every councillor would they live next door to this property or something similar, I think is a very noble question to ask. So the questions I have, which are a simple yes-no answer, but I think they will really bring home what we've been trying to get across here. So again, they're just yes-no. And I'll go through one at a time if that's all right, Your Worship. So Brooke and Mark, and I suppose especially Mark, because you are a professional, independent property valuer who has been called to give evidence in court before. So this question can go to both of you. But do you believe that derelict properties have a financial impact on the value of neighbouring properties?
You just want the yes, because that's an obvious yes.
That's all we need.
I can give you a lot of context for that, for the reasons why, but yeah, continue.
Do you believe derelict properties have an emotional impact on the neighbours' mental well-being?
Yes, or we wouldn't be here.
And my final question is, do you believe that councils across South Australia should take a stronger approach to crack down on derelict properties?
Yes, absolutely.
That's all I have, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Carbone. Is there anyone else who wishes to ask a question? Oh yes, Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Thank you for coming. In the ward that Peter Cornisher and I are councillors for, Rose Park Terrace Gardens ward, both of us probably have had residents wondering what happens to some properties because they are left in various states. The grass is not mowed, etc., etc. So one thing that these owners have done and that's contact the council and ask that a ranger attend to have a look at the property because there are various things that could be picked up, like vermin, and these are things that the council can control and act on. Has
Yes.
a similar exercise been done? What were the outcomes?
The rangers have come. I've been told that snakes can be found anywhere. They wait until December before they force the owners to cut down the weeds. So from all we've heard from the council, everyone's hands are tied. So I guess we're here to start to make that change and to lobby the powers that be to try and do things to get owners to not just sit there with a house with a pine tree and holes in the roof since 2016.
I think one of the arguments for why I've heard some of the councils are against it is because personal circumstances and availability of funds. And I think you use the example of an elderly person perhaps living in a home didn't have the funds to do that. Yes, I don't think it's black and white as with everything. There's definitely areas of grey, but when it's someone who has multiple land holdings, as this person does, who is clearly a developer, who has lodged applications which have lapsed, and essentially knows that the issue it's causing, yet is doing nothing, is sort
for
of...
their own benefit to
effectively to say, I mean,
have a
everyone
gain
knows
on
the demolition
land.
costs for that house would be somewhere between $7,000 and $11,000. So that's the real cost for them. But the impact for the neighbouring properties would probably be somewhere in the order of 10 to 15% negative impact. So on that street alone, probably somewhere between $100,000 to $200,000 negative impact as a result of the $8,000 that he is not spending.
And to be clear, this is a little bit different from someone having an untidy yard. This is a house that you cannot live in. It is essentially hard rubbish. Like, it should be knocked down. And as I said, I couldn't leave out anything out the front of my house to be collected more than 24 hours, yet this house is allowed to be in the state that it's in for years. And there's no consequence for the owners.
It does have multiple trees going through the house, and obviously there's a minimum standard of housing, and you can get such things as HIA orders put on a property. Yeah. There is no way in the world that this house is habitable in any way, shape or form as it stands. And I guess that makes it hard because it doesn't fit into the vacant land box. And where does it fit? I don't know, but obviously we're looking for some guidance to lobby and start the process of identifying and having some recourse or some, I guess, appropriate action to take when you come across a situation like this. Because at the moment our hands are tied, and it would appear that councils are to some extent as well. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Councillor Corney.
Thank you. I don't think
You've been playing with your buttons, but you were next, and then it was Councillor Davis. So I don't know why, but I've got Councillor Davis. So will you go first, please, Councillor Davis? Otherwise, it mucks up the microphones, and then it will be Councillor Cornish.
someone else is on. Who else is
Just turn these off.
I don't think it.
Oh, there we go. All right.
Matt
We've got a
doesn't-
ghost.
Anyway.
As you probably know, and you've probably been told a number of times, that council has limited power in relation to do this.
Yeah.
What action have you taken to essentially talk with, I suppose, Vicky Chapman, who is your local representative, and what has happened there?
We haven't brought it to Vicky Chapman's attention as yet. I guess that will be the next step. I just thought, I was just trying to ascertain with council whether this property will fall under the vacant land and doubling their council rates as an incentive for them to do something with this site rather than have it sit in its current state. Yeah, this is just the start. We're not going to stop petitioning council. We'll go get something in writing from the neighbours next, if need be, take it to Vicky Chapman.
Okay.
But
So yeah, I think that the administration can probably help you with, whether the rate applies, and I'd probably suggest that it wouldn't. We're governed by a Development Act, so local government action, our powers are, our hands are tied. So I would suggest the person to talk to would be Vicky Chapman, and to speak with her about it. But I'm sure the administration can help you with that. Not that we're not unsympathetic, I agree with you, but there's nothing I can do.
Hypothetically, let's say that that house existed and it had a 200 square metre extension to the rear which was not council approved and constructed. What would your powers be there? I guess. Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Henschke, you wish to...
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for the administration while you're here, and my question to them is based on the information you've brought to us tonight. And the question is regarding the definition of vacant land. Can I ask a question of the administration? Fine, thank you.
Okay. Needs to be a question without notice. You can only direct your questions to the deputies. Right, I don't have any other names on my list, so can I just say thank you very much for coming in, bringing this issue, we are aware of it, but bring it further to the attention of the members. And we, as Councillor Davis said, are somewhat tied, but the suggestion of contacting Vicky Chapman is a really good one. Okay. Thank you. Now, Mr. Christopher Shakes, would you like to come forward? And you have you've probably heard me say it, you have 5 minutes with a warning bell of at 4 minutes, and then again the same format if elected members wish to ask you some questions.
Thank you, Mayor, and councillors, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Chris Shakes and I live at number 29 May Terrace, Kensington Park. And the purpose of my presence here tonight is to seek your help in dealing with the problem that is number 39 May Terrace. And this issue relates directly to agenda item 13.7 for your meeting tonight. And I wonder if I could prevail upon you to actually look up page 626 of which contains where some photos of the said property are included. I understand that tonight you're seeking to make a decision about a front fence for number 39, and my neighbours and I have had an intense interest in this end of our street for some time, not necessarily in number 39 May Terrace, but for over 2.5 years. We've been working to put evidence before the various planning bodies in relation to the proposed development of an on-the-run petrol station across
Sorry,
the road.
Mr. Shakes, we can't talk about planning matters.
I'm not talking about
okay.
that. This is just by way of
CEO
context.
just reminded me.
Now, so in that sense, developments in and around the Regal Theatre have been of great interest to us, and in recent years there's been a significant transformation in relation to the public space and the businesses that occupy the Regal, and the council has had a positive and beneficial impact on that. So thank you on behalf of May Terrace residents for that work and that continuing work on that front. For many years, the park and house at the end of our street lacked a kind of a clear identity or connection with the local community. And I think there's now an opportunity to create a new and positive dimension to this site through an integrated planned approach that aligns with the May Terrace streetscape. I live 2 doors down, next door to an imposing old home that was sold recently, thankfully not to be developed, It's on a 1,500 square metre block, which includes some rare and beautiful old historic trees, apart from anything else, and the overall tone for the street, I think, is pretty largely set by that premises onwards. That's where residential zoning begins, and on the other side, in your car park and beyond, including number 39, there is a mixed use. So I think there's mixed use zoning. So I think there is a substantial scope for actually thinking about how those two zones interact and how we might deliver, through a planned approach, a better kind of fluidity and a better kind of coherence around how the street presents if we look at it from Kensington Road back through to the boundary of the car park on the northern side. Number 39 sits uncertainly across the car park. In relation to how the street presents and how the street is viewed, the Environment, Resources and Development Court, in a previous judgment, did remark on the fact that there is some sort of dissonance between the way that that property presents and the way the rest of the street is disposed. It's relatively shabby. And shabby properties in streets do tend to have a negative impact on future development, because I know from direct experience that shabby properties are used in court to demonstrate what the actual standard of construction and development is, as opposed to what we hope it might be. Recently, number 39 had a new fence put in, which was a great thing. The old fence was falling down. But I think in certain aspects, and particularly in relation to visual amenity, it displays kind of a lack of understanding of what the street looks like. And in my view, it may even be in conflict with what's set out within the development plan for our particular part of the world. So, number 39 and its surrounds are important because they mark the transition from a residential zone ending at number 31 May Terrace into a mixed-use neighbourhood zone. There is an opportunity to do something really good here, and I'm asking for Council's help in actually developing an overall concept for that entire precinct so that we do get a long-term viable option for the site.
I believe that's actually going to be done anyway, but it's being done actually at the moment, it's underway.
Well, we've heard nothing about it.
Because none of us have seen anything yet, and because it's not actually developed. But there is a plan always. There's always been an asset management plan for the Regal Theatre area, which incorporates that. It's underway.
A plan for a plan.
Yeah, it's actually being under construction at the moment, is what I've just been informed of.
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Piggott.
Thanks for coming in. Forgive me if I've misunderstood you, but in regard to what you see coming out of the other end of this plan when we do it, do you see that property really should be developed in a way that's not necessarily residential but ties in with the mixed use commercial use that's next door to it? Is that what would you have happen? I mean, I understand you want something done, it doesn't quite fit. What's your ideal?
Councillor, I don't have any fixed view about how that property should be used. It could revert to being a residential property. When I first moved into the street, our family, someone was living there, but it's kind of had a very long kind of transition to something else that's as yet unspecified. My key interest is in making sure that landscaping, visual amenity, line of sight right through to Kensington Road is actually enhanced. If you're just going to put fences up without considering the broader options that might be available in the longer term, then you are in an ad hoc mode of decision making, which could in fact create more problems than it resolves down the track. So my sense is that my personal view is that the garden elements, the importance of plantings, the use of green barriers wherever possible would be really critical, and also some sense of what the line of sight should be up and down the street. One of the things that the photograph that's in this, in your papers tonight kind of tends to kind of leave out is the view from the northern side of the property, where as you look down the street, all you see currently is a kind of a light industrial scale fence that's white, or near enough to white.
Yep.
So what I'm suggesting is that for financial reasons, and also for reasons that have to do with people's general well-being about living in a beautiful place, that council should pause and have another think about how that whole site is developed, and I'm pleased to hear that that work is underway.
Yeah, look, I think that you should be optimistic about that. It is a street we're all quite familiar with, actually.
Yeah.
and
For various
yeah,
reasons.
look, I think we've still got some work to do there. No question. I'm pleased that you made note early around the improvements that have happened in the last couple of years, because it's obviously been an issue. So
I mean, as a person with a long-term history with that site, having been to school nearby. I think it's been a very significant improvement, and the kind of development that's happened around the Regal site has been a very positive thing for the community, because it's drawn the community in.
great.
We need to maintain that success. I think depends on increasing the level of visual amenity and comfort and things like that for people who are using whatever happens there. So that's what I'm really arguing for.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for coming in tonight, Chris, and thanks for outlining your ideas and giving us some ideas for the review. And I think Councillor Pickett has summed up very well that we will take this on board. What we have to decide tonight is how we can fence the property more effectively. And I take on board and agree with you about the colour-bond fencing. I think that's unfortunate. Do you have a preference, or do the locals have a preference for the types of fencing that have been proposed tonight?
If you look at the street, and I'm pleased to hear that lots of you know a bit about it, but if you look at the street, the dominant kind of style of fencing is one where you've got green behind, some sort of plantings behind the fence. So I'm less concerned about the fence than about the greenery, but given the three options that have been made available, and given the fact that when the plan emerges there might be a need to rethink what's out the front, it makes sense to decide on an option that is easily removed in that event. So maybe the tubular one is the one that, which also happens to be the cheapest, is the one that might be most practical.
So you see that as a temporary fencing. Well, what about plantings? Do you think, what would soften the area and soften that industrial fence?
When the house made the transition from being a residence to something else, there was some pretty good landscaping done, which unfortunately has been allowed to sort of fall away a bit, thanks to factors that are beyond council's control, I suspect. So I'm not necessarily convinced that there needs to be fences at all. And this may be an unpopular view, but green barriers of some kind, if you need to have a boundary, boundaries define sort of what happens on one side and what happens on the other side. You need to be clear about both of those things. And if you're not clear about what's happening on the 39 May Terrace side, then it doesn't necessarily make sense to put a fence in. If you want people to feel free about coming and going to number 39, if it's used for something different in future, some sort of community service or something like that, you may not need a fence at all. So, but in terms of the current options, the tubular one seems to be the most practical.
Councillor Jones.
Hi Chris, thanks for coming in. So because I'm from Beaumont, so this is kind of like the Wild West to us. What is the site used for at the moment?
As I understand it, it's used for nothing particularly, maybe storage for the cinema and businesses in the cinema.
And how long has it been empty for?
It's hard to be specific about
A
that.
while.
I mean, it's not derelict.
Can I just suggest that when we get to the debate, that Mr Camp will actually answer those kind of questions later on.
Okay.
Is that okay with you,
Yeah, no,
Councillor
that's
Jones?
fine, I'm just-
All right,
Yeah.
all right, good.
But I think excuse me, the picture is sort of, is pretty clear about its current state. It's a pretty sort of accurate representation of the way it presents.
At least it hasn't got a tree through the roof.
No, it hasn't got trees through the roof.
Look on the bright side.
But if there was to be a tree through the roof, then it would need to be a planned tree.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, look, I don't have anyone else on the list, so thank you very much, Mr Shakes, for coming in and doing your deputation. And hopefully the answers will be answered later on, but it will be later on this evening before we get to
I
that.
appreciate that. Yes, I think I will.
All right,
I usually do.
thank you very
I'm one of
much.
the three who do. Thank you very much, Mayor.
There are no petitions, but we have got one person who wishes to ask a question, public question time. So if you'd like to come forward and sit in the seat there, and I'll turn my microphone off. If you just state your name and the suburb, it doesn't have to be the full address, okay?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Councillors. My name is Alan Todorovic. I'm from Hazelwood Park. I just wanted to come in tonight to ask a question about waste bins at Hazelwood Park. So I just live up the corner from Davenport Terrace and Hazelwood Avenue. And on that corner is a dog bag dispenser. Unfortunately, there is not a bin next to the dog bag dispenser. And there is an enormous amount of people that come into the park from that, northwestern corner, and they are leaving their dog bags at the base of the dog bag dispenser. So I just wanted to bring that to Council's attention. I think, if you've got a dispenser there, there should be probably a bin there. And the reality is there's not a bin anywhere on that sort of northwestern side of Hazelwood Park. The closest bin is in the middle of Davenport Terrace. So it was really just to come in tonight to bring that to the Council's attention and to ask for a bin on that corner, if possible.
I think that's a very sensible question to come in and ask, and so I'll just ask our acting CEO to give you an answer on that.
Thanks for the question, through your worship. I'm quite familiar with a lot of bins in the city of Burnside, but not that particular one. But I will take that on board, and I'll speak to the staff, and we'll determine whether we can put an appropriate bin in location.
Yep, that'd be great. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
And thank you very much for coming in and asking a very good question.
Thank you.
Right, questions on notice now, Councillor Henschke, if you wish. Oops, Councillor Henschke, if you wish to ask that question now. Oh no, that's not on notice. We've got them already. Oh, good. Thanks, Mr. Harvey. It's right. It's questions on notice. I got it wrong. So there's no question. We had no questions on notice, and we do have motions on notice. And the first one is Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Mayor Monso. Sorry, I'm just going to scroll back through the agenda. Hopefully this is reasonably clear. I'll just read it out. I, Councillor Hughes, do hereby give notice of my intention to move the following motion at the next ordinary meeting, that Council write a letter to the Honourable Vicky Chapman, Deputy Premier, Attorney General and Member for Bragg, to request state government support through the second round of black spot funding for the Greenhill Road pedestrian activated crossing. As you will see later on in the agenda, we were successful in the first round of funding for one of the two applications that were submitted, but the Greenhill Road crossing was unsuccessful. There is a second round of funding which is available for, I think, 2/3 of the cost of that, so that will automatically roll into that, but I think it's important that we go to our local member and ask the question of whether she can assist in supporting that. I do note that it also, we've gone through this before in the budget, and it is in our draft budget proposal, but this, I guess, is just in addition to that, to seek whether we can get funding as well as have it in our budget, just to cover all of our bases and hopefully make a saving. So that's pretty straightforward, so I'm done.
Councillor Davis, do you wish to second it?
Yep, it's always a good idea to ask state government for money, but I know it's budgeted already, but I think if we can access any funding, that'd be a good idea. Very easy, I commend it.
Councillor Hubel?
Oh, no, sorry.
Councillor Davey?
Yes, ditto. I was going to second it and third it too. Yes, I endorse all the comments that have been made. I think this is a very worthwhile proposal, so hopefully everyone will support it and we'll get the support of our local MP. Thank you.
Do you wish to sum up, Councillor Hughes? Oh, sorry, there's one just came through. Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I support this in principle. Just a couple of questions to clarify. Black spot funding has certain criteria.
Excuse me, you need to either ask questions of administration or raise some questions that Councillor Hughes may wish to respond to in her summing up.
Yes, so the question is, was black spot funding criteria met with this proposal?
Did you hear it? David's come. Yes, thank you. What's David's surname? Hayes, that's right. For those at home, it's Mr. David Hayes, who is going to respond on behalf of the council.
Yes, through the chair. The pedestrian activated crossing that we applied for on Green Hill Road does not actually meet black spot criteria, but you can lodge an application based on a road safety audit, and that's what we did in that case. In this case, yep.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hughes, do you wish to sum up?
No, just I guess to cover off on the question that Councillor Henschke has asked, I guess, I think it was written further back in the report, it is a proactive application in that sense, so it perhaps is not, wouldn't be as highly regarded as the one that we were successful on the parade. But I guess I think it's something we should still be asking the question at this stage.
Right, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Councillor Piggott.
Thank you, Mayor. The motion I wish to run is that one, that Council wishes to express its disappointment at the significant increase in the waste levy for 2019-2020 announced in the state budget. Two, that Council's 2019-2020 draft annual budget was produced to minimise the rate increase without compromising services. Therefore, the impact of the significantly increased waste levy announced by the State Government on 18th of June 2019 necessitates that it be passed on to ratepayers through a rate increase. If I could just change that, if you'll let me do that. I'll explain that in a minute, if I may. And that administration in consultation with East Waste provide a report detailing a strategy for using the RFID technology installed in the City of Burnside bins to drive suitable education and placement of food waste and all other compostable material into the organics bin. And speaking to that, I think we're all well aware of the surprise in the state budget last week, or certainly not that much. I think it was only last week. And there's been significant press around it. There's been significant level of councils needing to, well, all councils have needed to address what they do about an increase in the cost of disposing of waste to landfill. It is pretty significant. In the case of Burnside, it's about $200,000 this year because there's an increase starting Monday, and then a further significant 30% increase as of 1 January 2020, which is obviously the second half of the financial year we're looking at. And then when you roll forward the following year, it's $320,000 for the council. So we're faced with not only an immediate hit, but something that we really do need to address, because otherwise it'll be even a larger hit the following year. So really what this motion does is it equates to about 0.4%. In round terms, I read somewhere the government saying it was $8 a residence. With Burnside, I reckon it's about 10 in the first tranche, and getting on for 20 in the second, the following year. And in absolute terms, it is actually quite a chunk of money to suddenly find from a budget that we've actually worked quite hard to land, while keeping a lid on rates and keeping doing all the things we need to do. So So I feel it is though not ideal, I think it is the appropriate thing to do is to actually lift the rate increase this year to actually cover that cost. Point 3, the reason I changed it from a specific point 4 was to just, given that we haven't discussed the budget in full, probably gives a bit more flexibility for that motion to be debated. Number 3 is that quite aside from this happening, we are all aware of the high level of food waste and compostable material that goes into the into landfill, into the red bin, and that is where the game could be significantly, if not won, certainly the score would be improved if we could improve the amount of, increase the amount of food waste that actually went into the yellow lid as opposed to the red lid. And I actually think Burnside can, and I know East Waste is actually keen to push down this line. Burnside, when it bought the bins those years ago, put RFID technology into them. Prospect, I understand, also has it. And so I think Burnside could possibly be a real resource in regard to clever ideas about education and trying to drive better habits amongst residents generally, but obviously firstly with ours, in regard to their food waste. So I would appreciate your support on the motion.
Councillor Davey, you wish to second it?
Thank you, Mayor Monso. Yes, I thank Councillor Piggott for this for this motion on notice. I agree it's indeed very disappointing that the state government has significantly increased the waste management levy for 2019-2020 without any warning to the community, let alone local government, just as we're preparing our annual business plans and budgets, right in the last crucial week or two. I agree that we don't have any alternative, but at this stage of our cycle and our planning, that we have to pass the cost of the waste levy increase onto our community, and that based on the calculations that have been done for us, that we could do this with a 0.4% rates increase on what we circulated to our community for consultation. I don't believe we can compromise our services, particularly those relating to waste management. We need to proceed with a top order education campaign in conjunction with East Waste as necessary, so we can support our community to drive down the levels of waste we send to landfill. So we've really got to refine how we use our red lid bins, and I think we, as a community, can better demonstrate, we can provide the leadership, I should say, to our community to avoid or reduce waste, how we can reuse unwanted items and even items that we haven't technically or traditionally recycled, such as textile waste, how we can increase and refine our recycling practices, better separate household waste to increase compostable processing, and there's a whole lot of information that our community can be given. I think they're crying out for this. I think a lot of people need more advice about what to do with soft plastics and the single-use plastics and how they can avoid those. So there's a lot to do. I think using the RFID technology is a great way to go, and I think our community supports better waste management practices, and this will enable us, it's a push to enable us to use our leadership to institute that and put it in place, and it does need to necessitate a little bit more money, so I hope you'll support this.
Councillor Cubb.
Thank you, Worship. A question to the administration. Is there anything that we can actually do through the LGA, anything at all? Is it worth maybe lobbying some of the minor parties in the upper house? I'm assuming the budget requires passing through the Senate. Is there anything that we can do to block this?
Through your worship, difficult question to answer. The budget has been passed. It's all believe so, and I understand that it's pretty much a fait accompli that it will be rolled out across the local government industry. There's always strategies and lobbying that you can employ to further try and influence future decisions. But that would be for, I suggest, a bigger discussion than this tonight, potentially.
Councillor Cornish. Oh, sorry. It is Councillor Dawes.
Thank you, Mayor. I have spoken to Councillor Pickett about part one. I just express its disappointment. You know, it was a little bit soft, and you know, I've heard in the media gobsmacked and all sorts of words like that. I'm just wondering if Councillor Pickett and Councillor Davey would agree to add the word extreme disappointment to the motion.
Do you take that as not an amendment, but just a under the slip rule?
But having put it on, I feel it's not the main point. I feel that the games 1 and 2 and 3. It is there. Having said that, extreme disappointment. Yeah, okay.
Whatever. I'm happy to amend that.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Mayor Monceau. As you probably all saw, I sent out an email. I did quite a bit of research on the solid waste levy. And I've got to say, I do think that this is a prelude from the state government to attack communities. I really do. You know, we've got a solid waste levy that since 2004 has increased by 2,700%. That's a huge increase. If you equate that to a Big Mac would now be costing you $140 for a Big Mac. That's what we're talking about. Let's equate that increase. It's a huge increase. And it's about 65% times the rate of inflation over the same period of time. And on top of that, this money that they're now collecting, which I read in the paper today is around $42 million a year they'll now be collecting for this. Councils will only get to apply for 2.5 million, but actually it's 2 because the 0.5 is actually for administration purposes of the $2 million a year. There'll be quite a lot of the money that will be going to the Environmental Protection Authority, which I also note a couple of years ago, they provided all of their powers under the Noise and Litter and Nuisance Act to local governments to implement. So the Environmental Protection Authority has no real work to do, but is collecting a heck of a lot of money. The state government is also removing local contributory heritage items from development. They're removing community rights in development. They're attacking community. And I think I'm very supportive of this motion as it stands. Someone needs to actually stand up and say, you know, you're going too far here and this is really going to hurt community. However, I will say I'm probably not for increasing the rates more than the 2.4%. I've been listening to a lot of economic data recently, especially the RBA. We're potentially getting 2 more decreases in the reserve rate this year. The economy is going to tank later this year, and I don't think passing this on when we could probably absorb this into a surplus for this year would probably be a smart move for our residents and our ratepayers. I do believe that we should stick to our original 2.4 and not increase further than that. So I will be supporting a 2.4% increase and no more. But I do support letting the state government actually know that this is not on. You cannot go and dump this on local government that starts their budget processes in December, is legislated by the state government to actually go out to the community and consult on its budget. We're the only tier of government that does that actually consults on its budget, and we're forced to by the state, and then they dump this on us. A week out from, you know, the end of the financial year. It's absolutely, it's an extreme disappointment. So I'm glad that Councillor Dawes has incorporated extreme. It is an extreme disappointment, especially since April. Little bits have been leaking out about what's in that state budget from the state government, but they kept this one tightly held until the actual budget papers and the lock-in was done. So I'm fully supportive of this motion as it stands.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, in the agenda papers published, the motion item 2 reads that an additional 0.4% rates increase occur, which I strongly disagree with. So I see here that tonight the motion now reads item 2, the last few words there, that it be passed on to ratepayers through a rate increase. So I only support a rate increase as we went out to consultation to the community, where most of them, 70% of them, were satisfied. 32% were satisfied with a rate increase. So I see by going beyond 2.4 being very unpopular, and I support what Councillor Cornish has said, and that we must absorb any pressures, cost pressures, and look for ways where we can reduce our expenditure, cut costs, look at reviewing the services we provide, the non-essential services, which the community have told us about in our community survey. All of those items that are red under that line, we need to look at those things and decide what we want to keep and not keep. And we can do this as we go quarter by quarter through this year. Without rushing into this, a 2.8% increase, which was proposed in the published papers, is certainly a reaction, and for me it's not substantiated. Thank you.
Councillor Lem.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I endorse everything that people are saying, totally, except that we absorb the rate increase. And while I originally thought, yes, we can, I actually feel that would be politically unsound for us to do that, because I believe the state government can then say they absorbed that increase, we should cap the rates. I actually think there's a bigger political game going on here. So I think we have to pass this on. And I think we have to pass this on in a number of ways. Like, we have to pass this on, and we have to pass this on tonight, because are we going to absorb it next year? Are we going to absorb it the year after? We need to deal with it now. You got all the leaks in the world out of the cabinet process in terms of the budget, except this one. This was tightly held. This was a lockdown, and this blindsided every single council in this state, unnecessarily in my opinion. So I do believe that there are other political aspects at play here, quite frankly. My second point is, item 1 says we wish to express our disappointment. There's something missing here in this motion, and I don't know if it needs an amendment, but how are we going to express our disappointment? We're going to write to someone? Doesn't say. We're going to put something on our website? Doesn't say. So how are we going to express our disappointment? Where is our media coverage in terms of letting our people know this isn't our fault, this was foisted upon us by the current government? Where is that going to take place? So can this take place without an amendment to this, is my question to administration.
Through the Mayor, the advice from the administration would be to actually be prescriptive about how you want that to be communicated. At the moment, that will just stay in the minutes, but if you really want to get that message out there, then perhaps you should include that in the resolution.
So I propose an amendment, number 4, and the amendment would be that CEO, on behalf of the whole council, rights to the Premier, CCing with a CC, to every local government minister that crosses our boundaries. So that would include the Speaker, the Deputy Premier, David Pizzoni, Minister for Skills and Innovation, and have I missed anyone out? If people can... No, the LegCo doesn't matter, I don't think, at this stage. Yes, obviously, the Minister for Local Government, Stephen Knoll, the Minister for Local Government, expressing our extreme disappointment, at this last-minute measure without consultation, and informing them that we will pass this, assuming this will get through, that we will pass this on as a rate increase this financial year. Further, we will put a statement on our website incorporating the increases since 2004 and using Councillor Cornish's comparison to a Big Mac. I think that's quite powerful. I think that's really powerful. And that will work well on the website. So number 6, then I have a number 6.
May I just suggest a couple of additions to that before you move on to number 6?
Sure.
And that is to include David Spears, Minister for Environment.
Yes.
And the Treasurer,
yes.
Mr Lucas.
No, the LegCo doesn't make these decisions. No. Well, the Treasurer. The Treasurer will get them.
The Treasurer.
Number 6. And you may or may not be able to do this. Administration investigates whether it can, in the next rate mail out, put a line in, add a line saying this is the state government's levy on waste. If you get, I don't know how to actually put that in, but when our rates go out to our ratepayers, we used to have something that said an NRM levy. What I'd like it to include for this year's rates and thereafter is an actual figure that relates to this waste levy. So if that's possible, if we can actually, I know that these things are printed externally. Is it possible to do that? While you're investigating it, and if you can do it?
Through the Mayor, we can certainly laser a message or a sentence on the rates notice which will indicate that it does include the increase that's being passed on, but we will not be able to be specific for the actual figure because it will be different for every single ratepayer.
Yeah. So what you could actually put on this year's rates notice, the ones that are going to go out in July, is that there is an extra 0.4% rates, something along this lines, levied on this notice that was not planned for because of the state government's whatever. You can,
Yes,
I'll leave it up to you and the slip rule to follow the intention.
If Council resolves that in the final budget that's adopted, yes, we can.
Yes, thank you. And I think that then covers off the stuff in this motion to ensure that everybody knows that how extreme our disappointment actually is, but it also lets our ratepayers know that we've responded to this in this particular way unwillingly. And I think that is something we need to do for this to be complete. And I hope you support the motion.
I need a second.
The amendment.
I need a seconder for the amendment. Councillor Hughes, do you wish to speak now?
Just jump back on.
It's all right. I just did a good job of jumping the queue. I will second this motion. I think it covers off on a lot of bases that the original motion didn't. I agree with Councillor Dawes' comment that it is extremely disappointing, and essentially as a council we are collecting another tax for the state government that we then have to pass on to our ratepayers. And at this point in the game, and the work that we've gone through to get to this point and set our budget, it is disappointing. I do actually think that we haven't really talked about point 4 very much this evening, and I think that's really, that's one of the key things that are coming forward. You know, we can talk about what's happened and what's done is done, but what we need to do is actually come up with a plan moving forward around how we're going to make sure that the City of Burnside are doing the right thing. And if I think one of the figures that came out this week, and I haven't found it in my emails, but you know, it's up to $400,000 that ratepayers could potentially save if we got everyone doing the right thing and putting their food scraps in the bin. And I think I'd be really interested to see what comes out of that report and the level of detail that we can get, because there's a lot of other industries that are looking at smart technology and giving people access to data and how they're comparing against, you know, your street, your suburb, and the whole of the City of Burnside. And I think people perhaps underestimate the value in that information. And you know, we've got the bins, we've got the technology, but we're not actually doing anything with it. So I think that would certainly assist in the education process. And I think that's really, you know, we are where we are. I think, you know, Councillor Carbone wants to stand up against state government. I think what's done is done. What's passed by them is passed by them. We have to focus on how we're going to move forward from this point in time. So I support the proposed amendment. Thank you.
Could Mr. Kant just speak in relation to an issue in the motion?
Thank you, Your Worship. Allow me to be a pedant, if you don't mind, for a second. Number 6 doesn't actually direct us to do the work. It just... Martin has advised that we can do it, so I suggest we take out investigates whether it can.
Now, Councillor, everybody's lost their order, sorry about that, but Councillor Henschke, you're on there next. No, Councillor Turnbull.
Right. Thank you, Mayor. I would like to say that the words extreme disappointment are still weak. It's an outrage that they've done this, and they've done it with a lack of consultation, and the timing's been poor. I would like to suggest that we do a partial rate increase. So instead of going to 2.8, going to 2.6, and council absorb some of that money, and that will be in good faith to our ratepayers, that they can pay some and we pay some as well. And that could perhaps go over 2 years, so we have a surplus. And as I said, it's just good faith for the ratepayers. I don't support the 2.8. I'd go for 2.6, even 2.7. But let's just, and put it out with Councillor Lemon's excellent suggestion that the council has absorbed some of this as well. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
I think this is a golden opportunity. This levy was brought in by Labor. It started off as $5 a tonne. Labor put it up to $100 a tonne, which is most of your Big Mac increase. It's disappointing that Liberals have then put it up to $140 a tonne, I agree. But the whole point of the tax is to try and persuade people not to put stuff in landfill, which I think most people in the room is probably agree is a good idea, that we should recycle organics, we should recycle kind of recyclable things, and then we should try not to buy stuff that just get chucked away in landfill. So I think kind of philosophically we would agree that, you know, because otherwise landfill would be $40 a tonne, and we would just put everything in landfill because it would be cheaper than, it would definitely be cheaper than recycling anything, and it would be pretty much the same cost as the organics. So And obviously it's gone up to $100 a tonne and people are still filling the red bins with organic waste. So maybe this is a golden opportunity, I think, to say, guys, we could have put the rates up by 2.8% rather than 2.4%, but we're not going to put the rates up because we are confident that you, the good people of Burnside, will change your behaviour and put the bloody green waste in the green bin, not in the red bin. So that's what I think we should be doing, and that should be our publicity campaign. But we should say, that's, you know, carrot, no rate increase, stick. If you don't change your behaviour, then next year we will have to pass it on. So you've got a year, people, to change your behaviour. I think it's great. We've got the RFID technology. We should be able to get from East Waste the weight, you know, each week, each fortnight of how much is going in the red bins, how much is going in the green bins. We can put it on the website. We can put it in the Burnside Focus. We can advertise in the Messenger in our column. Are we winning our battle against red waste? So, I mean, that's just my thought. So, therefore, I would prefer to keep the rate increase to 2.4 and try this alternative with the proviso. If it doesn't work, and we'll be able to signal that to people long in advance. Guys, you haven't changed your behaviour. The rates are going up next year by even more. But that's good. And it's also keeping faith with the people of Burnside. We went out with consultation, 2.4. We did say, I think, in the consultation, this includes a surplus of 2% to cover contingencies. Well, this is a contingency. It's a kind of a sucky contingency that I don't really like, but we've got it. So, I mean, that is why I don't support the rate increase. I mean, I support most of the rest, but I really don't think we should put the rates up. So, I don't know, I probably can't amend the motion, but that is where my feeling is.
I think yeah.
So, but I guess we could vote against the motion, put a new motion up. So that would be my. Right.
We're still discussing the amendment anyway.
Right. Okay. Well, that's what I had to say.
Councillor Hubel. Significant amount of time.
Well, I don't want to speak to the amendment, so I'll let the amendment be voted on and I'll...
Okay. I just wish to speak to the amendment. I'm not going to discuss anything about rate increases at all. I just want to say that when this hit the newspapers in Canberra, the entire group of over 100 representatives from all over South Australia were infuriated. Appalled would be better words to describe than extremely upset or whatever. They were appalled because some councils had already met and approved their budgets. Some councils were meeting during last week. Some were meeting, I know Norwood, Paynter and Peters were meeting last night. Campbelltown had already passed theirs. I heard on a news report just before I left tonight that Salisbury's has increased their rates. I think the timing was absolutely shocking because most councils had already gone out to consultation and had already communicated with their ratepayers. Ratepayers had given the feedback. The timing was absolutely appalling. Every council in South Australia is affected by this, and it will have, because we're not just putting up the rates this year, we're going to be putting up the rates again next year as well, just to keep up with inflation. So this is really, what I think it has taught us, and I do, everything that's been said has been spot on. And I do believe that the real issue is we do have to re-educate. We have to change people's mindsets, and you're perfectly right, Councillor Jones, in that, to make better choices about where they put their stuff in their bins. And I think we were told at the Environment and Diversity workshop the other night, it was 46% of our ratepayers are doing the wrong thing in relation to the red bin and putting far too much organic material into the red bin. And that is not a difficult thing to do properly. And we have to change people's mindsets and behaviours, and that has to be a major consideration, and that is included in this amendment anyway. So, and I do think we have to be very strong, as Councillor Lemon said, in relation to telling the politicians we are not happy, because no other council in South Australia is happy. As far as you, Councillor Carbone mentioned, the LGA is certainly not happy. And the LGA organised the group of every South Australian who was there to be in a photograph to actually stand there with thumbs down and sour faces to say, we are not happy as a state. And that was quite public in relation to all of the other states that were represented. So this is a really, really dreadful decision by state government. Whether it's built on the Labor government's past decisions or not, this decision is appalling. The timing, and we don't see, and we have not seen, where this $120 million has actually been spent. I know the regional councils are up in arms because it's being spent on coastal development. Well, they haven't got any problems with coastal development, but they've got a huge number of problems with other issues to do with, particularly with roads, that we don't even have any sniff of the problem that they have. So this is unfair, unjust, and I'm very pleased that the motion was put up initially and this amendment has been placed. And I'm very happy for whichever way you decide to vote on. If you're happy, I will put the motion unless...
Sorry,
the amendment.
Could I ask a question of the administration of the amendment?
You certainly can.
Thank you. Obviously, with the additions of 4, 5 and with 4 it says we'll pass on a rate increase this financial year. If this council chooses not to increase its rates at all, how is this committing us to actually doing that?
Yes, it is.
So it is committing us when we come to the budget decision, we can't stay at 2.4? Or is it the fact that it's just a matter of creative accounting, and in fact we're increasing our actual rates by 2% and we've put another 4% on for this because we've decreased what we originally were going to do? I know, but how committed are we to noting?
Could we just agree to change that sentence?
She won't do it.
Okay, through the Mayor, the draft resolution as it reads at the moment, if that gets passed, then there is a commitment there from the Chamber that we will be passing on an amount of money as a result of the increase in the waste levy. When we get to the budget, obviously we went out and consulted on a 2.4% rate scenario, which also included a number of assumptions around our costs and our operating projects. So if you wanted to keep the rate percent at 2.4%, potentially what you could do is to incorporate an increase for the waste levy, but reduce, say, an operating project or something, so you still balance the books. So technically speaking, this is saying, yes, you will be passing on something for that waste levy increase, but you still have the scope to actually define what that rate increase is going to be.
So does that help everybody understand where we're sitting at this stage? All right, so the mover of the amendment, you wish to speak? No, you don't, no, because we just put it, okay. So I will put the amendment. Those in favour, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Right. Those against? Right, amendment is carried. So the amendment now becomes a motion. And is there anyone else? Yes, Councillor Hubel,
Yes.
you wanted to hold your time to speak.
Yes, I was biding my time until the amendment had been resolved. A question, and look, this is very similar to the previous question, but I was specifically looking at point 2, where we're talking about a general rate increase. Does that rule out the 2.4% increase in item 13.1? But I think that was answered.
Through the chair, sorry, Councillor Hubel, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, like if we're passing this motion,
yes.
Look, does that rule out the E&F option that's listed in the report later in the evening?
Leaving out the 2.4?
Yeah. Look, and I know that there are some changes that can be made to accommodate keeping it 2.4, but saying we're passing on the levy, which isn't really what we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Through the
I'm just
chair.
talking about. I'm just thinking ahead to 13.1 and that motion. How does this motion, as it stands now, influence how we're able to interact with 13.1?
Okay. Through the chair. Very good question. In theory, all this is committing the chamber to do is to, if it's resolved that way, is to pass through the increase for the waste levy to the community in our rates increase. Whatever that rate increase is yet to be decided. Chamber can agree to keep it at 2.4 as we went out to the public consultation. It could go up to 2.6, 2.8, whatever you like. But obviously, whatever we finalise that number to be, we'll need to take account of the 0.4 cost that's going to be passed through. Okay, so you can either reduce or increase it. So you have total flexibility still.
Okay, I'll speak to it now. Look, I think I see a couple of issues at play here. First of all, we've got the issue of making a statement, taking some leadership as a council and saying that passing this on is appropriate, and that's certainly the feeling of some in the chamber. And I also see the issue of what is effectively bad state government policy that's been in place for some time over Labor and Liberal governments. Passing on the rate increase, I think, is something obviously we've seen in the media. 4 councils in the metropolitan area, I believe, have already done. There are other councils meeting this evening, so it'll be interesting reading later what generally goes on. I think that it is appropriate to pass on to a point. I think I like the idea of we'll take some, but we can't absorb it all. I mean, this government, the budget that we'll be looking at later tonight has been carefully prepared with, regard to, operations activity, capital expenditure, service provisions, as well as servicing debt. And I think, look, if we absorb the levy completely, I think we're compromising the process we've gone through in preparing the budget. So I think some of it does need to be passed on. But at the same time, I think if we pass it on completely, we are, and look, perhaps this is comments better suited for later on, but they're in my head, so I'm going to say them now. I think if we're passing it on completely, we're copying the mistakes of state government policy. And that is that if you make something more expensive, people won't do it. Now, we know that that's not the case. We can see that 47% of red bins have organic material. That's just a phenomenal amount of material going to landfill that shouldn't be. Educating, I think, the community about using the bins appropriately is where we should be going. So I'm a big fan of part 3 of this motion. So I'd support the motion as it stands, and we've got some real thinking to do later on tonight.
Councillor Davis.
Just a suggestion for the debate later on is if you don't pass on that money, that's going to cut into your surplus, and you're going to have even less money to then because it's going to hit you anyway, so you're going to have to pay it. Then you have even less money that you can actually go out to the community and try and communicate that to them. So what you might like to do, something for you to consider, is that if you pass on the full amount and then say, I'm going to take 0.1% of rates, quarantine that for a continually ongoing advertising campaign to try and reduce the amount of green waste that goes into the red bin, and then over the time, as we spend less and less money on it, then it'll come back, if that makes sense. So why don't you pass on the full rate increase, quarantine a portion of it, dedicate that to advertising in order to reduce the ongoing cost in future. But I also put it to you that if we are successful in reducing the amount of money that goes to landfill, the amount of waste that goes to landfill, the state government will just hike the prices again. So if you have a look at how much landfill's been going and how much council around the nation, particularly in Burnside, we do it very well, more better than most other councils. Even though we do better and better, the price seems to go up and up because, in my view, it's not about a disincentive. It's about collecting revenue for a state government because they're losing some $500 million in GST. That's why they're doing it, because they've got to balance the books. So by not passing it on, you're going to hurt yourself this year, next year, and we should still try and make attempts to reduce the amount of waste that goes to landfill. But at the end of the day, if we are successful in reducing the amount of waste that goes to landfill, they're just going to hike it anyway. So the only thing you're doing is hurting your bottom line and giving the state government a basis or a bastion from which they can defend passing on this levy, because they say, oh, look, at councils will just absorb it. So they say, well, look at Burnside, they absorbed it, or they absorbed a good portion of it. So I'm not sure what all the other councils are whinging about. So in my view, we should make this statement clear that passing the buck isn't acceptable, and that's really what you should consider.
Councillor Henschke, do you just have a question because you have already spoken? I believe that Councillor Carbone, you're the only person who has not spoken on the matter. If you wish, do you wish to waive your opportunity? Thank you. Then I will go to Councillor Piggott to sum up.
I think we've all said enough, so we'll sum up.
Except for me, he means.
Yes.
Yeah.
You take your full 5 minutes.
Look, I think this is a motion as it's put and as it's developed is probably something that, even though the view around the ultimate rate increase is quite different potentially around all of us, I think this fits with all of it. And I appreciate Martin's response to the question about what does happen when we do talk about the budget, because whatever rate increase we end up with tonight, there's no question that 0.4% of it will be because of the waste levy that hit us 7 days ago. Something has got to give. Something we went out with consultation 3 months ago will have to be different by that amount of money in order to go forward. It's either the rate increase, the surplus, or the things we want to do next year. So that is the choice of it. So whatever it is, I think that rate notice that gets the line, that is 0.4%, is extra because of an increase in waste levy. The other thing I'd just like to say is that the price indicator, whether that works or whether it doesn't, is at the moment residents of Burnside don't really understand the cost of putting food in the red bin. They don't. And what the state government's saying here is that they're giving us the price indicator to do something about it. What we need to do, and I think we do have the opportunity, not through price necessarily, but through education and through really buckling down on it, is to try and perhaps lead the state even, because we do have the technology available, I think, that we may be able to do some things with it. Won't necessarily be politically straightforward, being specific about what's in people's bins, but I think we do have an opportunity to potentially lead the way here, so, and help take some of the pain out of the cost of sending stuff to landfill. So I think it's something we can all vote for.
Those in favour, please raise your hand. And carried. Division's been called. Those who voted in affirmative stand, please. Councillor Lemon, Councillor Carbone, Councillor Turnbull. I just realised I'm going too fast, sorry. Councillor Dawes, Councillor Hubel, Councillor Cornish, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Davey, Councillor Pigott and Councillor Davis. Those against, Councillor Jones and Councillor Henschke. It was carried. Right, next is questions without notice. You had a question, Councillor Henschke?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The question without notice is in regards to the deputation received this evening from the residents on Everard Avenue. The question for the administration is, could these derelict properties be classified as vacant for the purposes of rating? And also, can the council do anything about the dead trees that are sitting on the roof of this house? Thank you.
Through the Mayor, thank you for your question, Councillor Henschke. In regards to the derelict property, in this particular instance, it's classified as residential property, so it would not be counted as vacant land and incur the additional rate in the dollar as we speak. So that's, and that will be the case for all derelict properties. In terms of the additional fuel load that's on that particular site, I did talk to the Rangers team earlier today, and we have a process of issuing notices for reducing the fuel loads. Predominantly that is focusing on grass, because that's the most ignitable material that's on vacant properties. But in this case, clearly there is a lot of dead wood, which adds to that fuel load. So I've spoken to the Rangers team today, and we believe that we can, through the 105F notice, ask the resident or the owner of that property to actually clear that wood. So we will do that. And I'd also like to say, to date, the owner of the property has been very compliant in terms of adhering to those notices. So I think there is more that we can do on that front.
Thank you. Councillor Pigott.
Could I just as a follow-up on that, could you remind me what we were doing as a result of Councillor Carbone's motion to council in regard to this issue? Was it trying to change the law of the state government, or? There's a report coming, perhaps, yes.
Was it a report or a letter? Not relying on that,
Oh, was it lost? Oh, okay. All right. And I had a follow-up question, but given the owner seems to be compliant, would they respond to a request from council to be more neighbourly and sort the property out, do you think? Is that worth a shot?
Possibly, but maybe more effectively through the Mayor, sorry. Our team leader of building has been keeping an eye on this property in terms of all the safety issues, and because of the particular location of the property, the triggers that are necessary to enforce some action in terms of demolition haven't been triggered yet. Now, that's not to say that that position won't change, and potentially we do have the ability to insist on work being done to that site to make it safe, which in this instance would include demolition. So I think that's something we will keep an eye on as we go through the year. So, yeah, that's probably more effective.
Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Worship. A question to the administration, but just a very quick answer to Councillor Pigott's question is the motion was lost, and I have no idea why. But I did provide a submission to the state government.
It's not appropriate for him to be answering that.
Question to the administration. Just to follow up to Councillor Henschke's question, so what can be done to include derelict properties in the vacant land premium program that we have?
Thank you for your question. I'll probably have to take that one on notice. I'm not sure what that trigger would be. Obviously, if they demolish the property, then in essence, the plot does become vacant.
I'll ask the question a different way.
Yep.
So what process is there for us to include derelict properties in our vacant land classification, so therefore they would be required to pay a 200% premium? What can we do to include derelict properties in that program?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I understand the question, but I'll still have to take that one on notice and get back to you. Thank you.
Any other questions without notice? Move on to motions without notice. Reports of officers. 13.1. We'll be guided by the meeting, but I thought that since this is the most important item on the agenda, that we do this now, rather than going through and calling names for all the rest of them. We just focus on this one here, so I'm going to ask for someone who wishes to withdraw this for this debate. Yes, you may. Is there someone in the gallery? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. I think the budget has to be a priority. So, and I'm going to suggest that we move into informal motion, into informal mode for till 9 o'clock, and that would be our natural break time. Then, are you happy to move that, Councillor Davey, and seconded Councillor? I happen to be looking this way. Do you mind, Councillor Cornish? Sorry about that. I'll make sure I look this way. So those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against, carried. So we'll just go into informal motion, and you can ask questions or make comments as you wish.
I had some questions, specifically around, I can see A and B at 2.8, E and F at 2.4. Would it be possible to get a fairly, I guess, abridged summary of the absorption of the waste levy that occurs in E and F? What is it in E and F that gives way without the extra income, given the costs? Very abridged summary, just to...
Yep, through the Mayor, that's very easy to answer, Councillor Hubel. All we're basically doing is taking the cost impact, which in this case is 160,000 from what we went out to consultation with, and reducing the operating surplus. So if you recall, we went out with just over $1 million worth of surplus, $1,032,000. So basically it just reduces that amount by 160. So everything stays the same. We go out and ask for the same rate revenue, but we recognise the fact that our cost base will go up. We're not reducing any projects or looking for any additional savings, therefore it comes straight off the operating surplus. There's also obviously potentially an impact on the level of debt, but it will be small too. So that's effectively it.
Okay, great. That's what I suspected as well. Another question, are there any other instances, and pardon my ignorance in this regard, are there other instances in recent history where similar levies have been imposed and they have been either absorbed or directly passed on? Is this something that has happened in living memory, or recent memory at least?
Through the Mayor, I can't think of anything in recent history along the similar lines as this. We did have an instance where a couple of years ago, when we were looking at a reduction in our costs as a result of the income that we were expecting to get from recyclable, but that was unfortunately short-lived, so that went the other way. Obviously the NRM levy is a separate level, and we pass that through as a separate rate in the dollar, and that's identified separately. But no, there haven't been any other cost issues, and generally we've been pretty good in the budget process in terms of identifying those pressures to make sure that we don't get hit by this.
But this scenario we're under is unprecedented. That's
yes, it is.
Yeah.
Is it also the case that it necessarily is always passed on?
There's other people before you on the list.
Okay.
Can we just follow this? Otherwise we'll just have too many people interrupting all the time.
And one last thing, and then I'll I'll let things go out. I'm just wondering, out of curiosity and to help us along this evening, have additional percentage increase scenarios been considered, and is there any work that's happened, I guess, to prepare us for this meeting and this debate?
Through the Mayor, yes, we have. We've modelled, we've recommended the 2.8%, which obviously is in front of you in this report. We have the original 2.4% ready to go. And we've also modelled 2.6 and 2.7% scenarios too. So if you decide on those this evening, we're ready to go with those numbers. Yeah.
Do you want to add, however, if you choose a different number?
Sorry, yes, thank you.
It might be worthwhile.
Thank you, Mayor. I should just add that if Council resolves to do anything different from that, it may involve the administration going back to the spreadsheets and recalculating those, which may necessitate another special meeting or the presentation of the budget again on the 9th of July for adoption.
So would you like to just remind them which ones you have modelled?
Sure, so we've modelled the 2.4, 2.6, 2.7 and 2.8% scenarios.
So those are really the options that, unless you want to come back for another council meeting, they're the options that you need to consider tonight. Now I have Councillor Dawes.
Thank you, Mayor. And it's interesting that those 4 options have all been discussed tonight, isn't it? So that's interesting to me. Now, I'm going to page 26. We've only briefly mentioned this, and that's the operating surplus. At our workshop going back a couple of weeks, the net cost of doing business before the waste levy was increased was 2.3%. Right? And I think the workshop thought, well, we could possibly do 2.4, but the actual net cost of business was 2.3%. That's what the workshop came up with. And for every 0.1% increase in rates, that is about 39,000. I think that's right, Martin. Now, with the operating surplus, we asked the residents whether they would support a moderate surplus, and that we gave an example of $985,000. And I've got those papers here. So if you go to page 26 with the table there, with the 2.8% recommended, that gives us an operating surplus of 1.032 million. So if we wanted to stay with the 985, because that's what we went to the residents on, and I heard tonight that we went to the residents with 2.4, we also went to the residents on 985, so that is about 40,000 more, which means that, you know, if we're going to obtain a higher operating surplus, then we shouldn't really increase it by 2.8, but we should really increase it by 2.7. That's how I read that. So that's where the 2.7 has come in. Councillor Turnbull says we should go halfway. Councillors Henske and Cornish were going for 2.4, and I think others were talking about 2.8. But just look at the operating surplus, which I think that's what the residents will say to us. Hadamar, we supported you on 985, you know, so why do you need to increase the surplus even more if you go to 2.8? You know, you should stay at 2.7. So I just want to put that forward. I'm not saying I'm going to support 2.7, it's just that I don't think it should be 2.8. Thank you.
Councillor Henske.
Thank you, Mayor. At the Audit Committee meeting, it was discussed that, in fact, Martin Cooper, it's a question for you to perhaps share with the Chamber here. The discussion we had, I believe I asked a question about the savings targets, and we've had 1% in the past, and we have a certain savings target here as well. But can you explain to the Chamber what you said in the Audit Committee, that later in the year I understand there's going to be a review by the government that will be looking at more savings, because I think that needs to be clear to us, because that's why I'm banging on about savings, because we are going to be looking at savings whether we like it or not. So thank you.
Through the Mayor, thank you for your question. The current draft budget includes 2 savings elements. There's $370,000 worth of savings based on a 1% saving on material and contractor costs, and also employment costs. It's fair to say that the way that we do our budgeting, where we budget for a full workforce, so we don't budget for vacancies as they arise. Generally, we are able to achieve the savings targets on our wages and salaries costs. At this point in time, though, we haven't identified what our contractor savings are going to be, so that's the challenge that we'll have going forward. So in addition to the 370, we've also got the 400,000 savings on LED, which we're passing straight through. So I think the comments that we were looking at in terms of the workshop and at the audit committee was reference to the productivity commission that's been tasked to pull together some methodology for local governments to be able to compare how they're performing in terms of services and the cost of providing those services. There is no methodology at the moment. It's very difficult to compare how councils are tracking against each other in terms of the services that they provide. So there is a workshop with local government next week, and there'll be a draft paper out in August and the final paper in November. And that will hopefully give all councils the basis on which they can really review the services and the costs of those services and give a framework in which we are able to benchmark our current costs. So I think from our side, the administration side would be that we really encourage that to happen so that we've got some science behind being able to target some savings. Whilst we think we're doing okay with that information, that will be very helpful. It also provides much more science to setting those targets. So if you were to say, well, okay, we Google 2%, every council's trying to make 2% saving, well, what's that 2% being based upon? It's really meaningless unless you look at the foundations and your starting point. So this will really put some science behind it. It's going to be very interesting what that methodology provides us with, and I think we look forward to that information coming out and taking that on board.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Mayor Monceau. Yes, everyone, I'm definitely of the fact of a 2.4%. Still, I might be able to compromise to 2.6. I'm just throwing that out there. This is informal debate and conversation. But I'm very cognizant of the costs and the implications of these costs that the state government is shifting. And I did ask the administration as soon as I heard back on Thursday to provide me with a list of some comparable services that we could completely cut from our community. How about Pepper Street Arts Centre? It's $252,000. We just close it down today and we still would be looking for money to cover this waste levy. We just closed down our arts program. How about traffic and cycle management? So on-street parking, line marking, traffic management activities and projects, that's only $154,000 a year. So we could get rid of that too, as well as Pepper Street, and we could just completely shut those services down. You know, cost cutting, this is what the state government wants us to do, I suppose. Biodiversity nurseries and Indigenous biodiversity sites. So all the great work that we've done rehabilitating 2.5 kilometres of creek lines in the city of Burnside, $205,000 a year, gone. You know, and we're still looking. Rapid response service for, you know, reactive customer responses, including public council infrastructure, safe dealing with illegal rubbish, $142,000. Verge spraying and verge cutting, you know, that's a little under $300,000, gone. We could just not do that anymore. How about, let's stop collecting e-waste. That's $160,000 a year. We could just stop doing that as well. You know, if the state government's looking at where we're going to cut our costs. Or the big one, let's stop any compliance with development. $386,000 we spend on compliance for development. We could just stop doing it completely and just give the money to the state government for a solid waste levy. I think it's really important to give those comparisons to the community when they actually realise, you know, money doesn't grow on trees. We're going to have to cut something, or we're going to have to charge you more. You know, there is a balancing act here. And although I do not advocate cutting any of those services, because I actually think they're all extraordinarily important for this community, I do think we could actually, you know, reduce our buffer that we've, you know, usually put in for contingencies. And for me, I think this is a contingency. But, you know, I'm just saying that 2.4 for me, but I've certainly done a bit of paperwork.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mayor Monzo. I just have a question. We've done a whole lot of work. We've done work on the 2.4% increase. If we actually went to a 2.8% increase, what would be the difference in hard dollars in a rates notice, roughly? Yes, just on the average, without wanting to put you on the spot. I don't think it's... Oh. And you haven't got Karishma. No, I just wanted, just so we can, we're talking about big numbers, and Peter, Councillor Cornish has given us a great example of our services and the importance of these and how we fund them. But I just thought if we could just see what the difference is in, you know, the 2.4 as a 2.8%.
Can I suggest that we leave Martin to find that out?
I'm happy to.
We go on to some other questions and we come back with the answer, since we're informal. Councillor Leonard.
Thank you. I'll dispute what Councillor Cornish is saying in the sense that we should, in fact, absorb it into our surplus this year. And while I actually feel my initial response to this was, yes, let's absorb it into the surplus for this year, because I understand that our people, many of our residents are on fixed incomes as retirees. I understand that. But what are we going to do next year when it's that much higher? And the year after? And the year after? Like, are we going to absorb this forevermore? And how are we then going to respond to the state government when it says, well, Burnside needed to cut some fat out of its budget, didn't it? Because I don't believe we have got any fat in our budget, quite frankly. I think we provide some pretty good services, some excellent services actually, because people come from other places to, in fact, use our library and use our swimming pool and use any number and go to Pepper Street and do art classes and whatnot. So I think our services are exceptional, and I don't want to decrease them. But actually not making the hard decision tonight is only putting it off until next year. And I just think that making that hard decision tonight and actually taking 1% off and actually letting our people know this, we're going to quarantine some of this money for an education campaign on red waste bins, about dropping this entirely, getting rid of, at least halving. Let's have a goal. That 47% of green waste that's in our red bins, let's make that 25% by this time next year. Let's make that a goal for this council, and say if we can do that, it's going to cost us this much less in terms of our levy, because we're actually sending this much less to landfill. I think we need to do that. I don't think we can pussyfoot. As much as we want to, as much as we don't want to increase the burden on our ratepayers, as much as we don't want to make life harder for people on fixed incomes, I don't know that we've got a lot of choice in the long term, and I don't think we've got any choice in the short term either. And as smarmy as this sounds, it's not our fault. And I think we make that very clear. And if we don't do that this time, what fresh hell are we going to get from the state budget next May? You know, I just think somewhere there's got to be a line in the sand. And I think today's the day. And I think you'll find that our colleagues around, everybody will have grappled with this. We've all gone through this process, we've all gone to our community, and I'm heartened about what the community has said in this, in the sense that the 75%, 3/4 of the people that have responded to our survey are okay with what we're proposing. I think that's fantastic. I hate the fact that we're going to now give them not what we said we were going to do. I hate that we're going to do that. But I don't know that we've got any choice, in the sense that I don't want Rob Lucas to look at this council as though it's got wobbly knees. I just don't want that, and I think we need to be very mindful of that.
Councillor Piggott.
One of the other unfortunate things about this waste levy is that it has completely ambushed the discussion on this budget from all the good things in the budget that we we went out on consultation with, and page, I can't work out what page it is, but it's a sea of green in terms of where we sit in regard to LGA indicators and all the things we wanted to do. So that's a disappointing, thank you, page 45. So I think we shouldn't lose sight of that when we eventually do debate this. And I would just say, I feel Councillor Cornish's passionate running of all sorts of examples really does, I think, support the case that we do need to put it through, because the alternative is, and he's picked some high profile and highly emotional ones, I get that, but that is what it is. We could take a bit out of the surplus. The surplus is not exactly massive though. I mean, if you go back, I don't know how many years, we had a storm that hit this council to the tune of 1.5, I think, in 1 year, and over $1 million the other year. It took us 2 years to sort it out. So, and that was really the reason why putting a sort of $1 million surplus as being a reasonable thing to do. So I don't think we should mess around here. The 2.4 was really well accepted. The budget as it stood was really well accepted. The 2.4, Councillor Dawes' point about that things have cheered up a little bit by $40,000, I think just muddies the waters. Yes, that's true, but it's not like it's hundreds of $1,000s different. And we need, I feel, a surplus around $1 million. I think that's right. And so I think we should keep it really clear cut. We had a budget that was really well accepted. It's a really good budget, and 10 days out, we need to find another $200,000. It just needs to come from the ratepayers, first and foremost. So that's what I said.
Councillor Jones.
I support 2.4 for the reasons previously mentioned, which I won't go on about again. But as for savings, I have to tell you, we have a motion later on tonight to spend $12,000 to build a 13-metre fence. Now, anybody who thinks a picket fence costs 925 square metres, $925 a square metre, needs their head examined. So please don't tell me that we cannot save money in this council. So that's all I'm going to say on the matter. If it's informal, I can come back again, but I think we're kidding ourselves, frankly.
Councillor Day.
There's been discussion tonight about it's like a contingency. The $1 million is a contingency for just things like this. It's not. The $1 million essentially does go to paying down debt more quickly, and you know there's been years in the past where the surplus was almost at zero. And so by putting in $1 million, that actually gives us a sufficient budget. This is not a contingency. This is not a one-off thing. This happens every single year. And what you also need to understand is that it's compounding every single year. So you either do it this year, or you do it next year, or you do it the year after, because every single year you don't do it, you're paying compound interest on that. And then your compound rates that you lose and lose and lose. We went out to the council with $1 million. And if you're talking about 2.7 or 2.6 or 2.8, my suggestion to you is don't get bogged down in that, because what you're talking about here is a couple of bucks for a whole house, a couple of bucks. So if you're going to go one way, go 2.8 or go 2.4. Otherwise, we'll have however many split between 2.7, 2.8, 2.6, 2.4, and we'll have 3 people for one, 3 people for another, and 3 people for another, and we'll never get there. So what I'd suggest to you is you contain your debate 2.8 or 2.4, make a decision either way, whether you pass it on or absorb it. In my view, there should be a motion following, and I'd go with 2.8. My preference is 2.8. We went on 2.4. It's a very clear message to say we're going with 2.4 plus 0.4, and that's it. This will happen next year. It will happen the year after. And my suggestion to you is, unless you have a guarantee by Rob Lucas that there will be no further waste increase in years to come, then don't take it as an incentive or a golden opportunity. There's no golden opportunity here, because if you do what you're supposed to be doing and reduce your cost to waste, what you'll see is that he'll just increase it next year because he still has to meet that line. He's not going to give up the expenditure. So it's going to go up and up and up until it gets ridiculous, and in which case it'll just get banned depending on how successful you are. But I don't think that will be the case. So I wouldn't play into that. My suggestion is to go with 2.8. There's not a contingency. It's going to happen the year after, and the year after, and the year after, and it's going to go up every year after that. And I would suggest to you that it's quite easy at the next council meeting to then say move a motion on notice. I think it's too hard to do it tonight to say we're going to spend an additional $40,000 a year, which is that 0.1, to now go out to our community, increase the awareness. We can do it with stickers and things like that, but do that at the next council meeting. So I'd suggest 2.8 and make it clear.
Okay, Mr Cooper, you have your answer to Councillor Davey.
I do. Thank you, Mayor.
Lillian, can you just turn your...
Oh, no, she's in line.
Oh, she's in line, yeah.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank Karishma at home, who's on the ball. Thank you, Karishma. Karishma's provided us with the information to answer your question. So bearing in mind that this is a stepped increase for the next financial year, it doesn't reflect the whole 40% increase. The residential average rate would increase from 1,866 under a 2.4% scenario to 1,873 under the 2.8% scenario. So there's $7 extra. And in vacant land, the same figures under 2.4% would be 2,732, and under 2.8% would be 2,742. So another $10. Sure, yep. So residential average rate, this is, will go from 1,866 to 1,873, an increase of $7. And the vacant land goes from 2,732 to 2,742.
Right, we need to extend the time if you wish to go have any further informal discussion, or you have a choice to move straight into the formal debate. But it is also 9 o'clock and we would normally have a little break at this point in time. So I'm open to you to make the recommendation through a motion as to what you would like to do. Councillor Piggott.
I'm moving to run the motion. We go back into...
You're moving to move back into formal mode and continue a formal debate without a break.
Please.
Seconded by Councillor Davey. Right. So I need to move it now, so I'll ask for an indication from those present. Those who wish to continue straight away without a break, please raise your hands and move directly into formal motion. Right. And those against? Carried. So we're moving straight on and continuing, but we're going into formal motion now. So now before, the problem's going to be as to how we're going to handle this. I think it might be best to be handled by breaking this motion up into parts, and that we do maybe points 1 and 2 first, and then 3, because the 1 and 2 should be, hopefully, a little more straightforward, unless there's something that I don't know about. And then we move on to 3, which will no doubt be somewhat contentious. And then we can move into, I can't read number 4, into 4, etc. as a separate. So are you happy to just run with 1 and 2 first? And then we go to 3, etc.
Yep.
All right?
Yeah.
Well, can I have a mover then for parts 1 and 2? Councillor Davis?
Yeah, move 1 and 2.
Okay, so you're happy to move 1 and 2. Is there a seconder for items 1 and 2? Thank you, Councillor Davey. Is there any discussion required?
If there are no changes, do we need number 2? Councillor Davis has got his microphone on.
Yeah, correct. Just get rid of 2.
All right, if there are no changes, so we delete number 2. Forward number 2. You had to say.
Got to be clear here, because if the mover and the seconder are saying that there are no...
I'll just say that there are no following... Yeah, so there are no modifications.
Yeah, so therefore the motion has to be done like that without an amendment.
If there's an amendment that seeks to add to it, it's then not appropriate, so that would have to be lost and then...
I withdraw. Why don't you just get Councillor Just get Councillor Carburn to move 1 and 2 if he wants it.
Yeah.
If you want to make an addition, you move it.
All right, okay, might be better. Councillor Carbone, you wish to move items 1 and 2?
Thank you, Worship. So I move as is, but with the project maintenance fund for significant trees on private land. Initial was 5,000. Revised 50,000.
Do I have a seconder?
Do you want me to speak to that, or are we not doing that, or?
Yes. No, you get to speak. I apologise.
Okay.
First page. Oh.
Speak.
Okay, thank you, Worship. Look, this we've discussed this before, and I don't want to go over old ground too much, but this was a very important issue at the last local government elections. It was a very popular policy of mine at the election and ever since on social media and so forth. And you know, it is disappointing that the motion didn't get up the first time, and you know, we do have an issue with a diminishing tree canopy that requires real action. I have read most of your election brochures that you distributed in November, and most of you certainly directly or indirectly made reference to the fact that you are pro-trees and pro increasing the canopy. So I'm looking forward to us finally taking real action on this matter. This is not the time for talk. We've had years and years of talk, and the last 4 years we've lost 200 significant trees on private land, and I'll be damned if that's going to continue for another 4 years. So we need to stop the bleeding, we need to stop the carnage, we need to take real action on a very, very important issue. And I believe that offering a carrot, offering a financial incentive to the community will go a long way in stopping that. Now, the maintenance fund that we are talking about is a 50-50 contribution on any work done by owners of significant regulated trees on private land. So if they want to trim a branch, do anything like that, they can apply and we will pay for half. Okay? But at the moment, it's only $5,000. It'll be wiped out in no time if we promoted this properly, which we will be doing moving forward. So we need to increase it to 50,000 to make it meaningful. People who have significant trees on their own private land, as I've said countless times in this chamber, they wear all the cost. Yet the community gain all the benefit. So it's not very fair and it's not equitable. So we need to do everything we can, and this isn't the silver bullet, this won't solve all the problems, but if it saves 10 trees, 5 trees per year, is it worth it? That's what you have to ask yourself. I'm sick and tired of getting phone calls, I'm sick and tired of getting emails and comments on social media about how we are losing all of our trees all the time. We had one in Rose Park a couple of weeks ago, and we had one in Stonyfell only 2 weekends ago. And I'm sick and tired of hearing about it. Because what is our response? What can we do to stop it? And the answer is always nothing. The budget does have an item for saplings, okay? But that rectifies the issue in the future. Planting trees now, the saplings will be significant trees in the future. But what about now? What are we doing to incentivise people to keep their trees now? So that's it. I won't say any more. I think we're going over old ground now. But if you are serious about trees, now you've said it in your brochure, if you are serious about trees, then be serious about your actions.
Right, do we have a seconder? I'm waiting for a seconder first. No seconder? Then the motion has lapsed.
I'll move 1 and 2. I'll just move that. There are no following additions, such modifications.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Davey? Still got your microphone on.
Just to be clear, yeah, number 2 is there will be no additions, deletions, modifications in the 2000 annual budget prior to finalisation. Yeah, cool.
Seconded by Councillor Davey. Councillor Henschke, you wish to speak? It's my
Yeah, I'll speak against this, and we do really need to consider a project that was missed and not debated, which was the Dulwich Master Plan. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Oh, I don't know if I'll say that. Oh, look, no, I'm not going to speak.
Yeah, just very quickly, we went out to the community on this budget. Unless there's something massive that comes out, we should pass what we went to the community with. You know, in terms of putting things in and out, we've already decided that, and the community have already said that it's a good idea. So I think we should put what we put out to them.
Those that are in favour, please raise your hand. Sorry, those against? Carried.
Been here a long time. Okay, look, we've canvassed the issues around this one, obviously, in terms of the rate increase. And I'd just like to succinctly, if I may, just put I feel we did a lot of work ahead of the 2.4. It went out to the community. In actual fact, the consultation in terms of the response I felt was really good. A, there was a lot of it, and B, it was actually quite heavily supportive of the direction we are taking the place. And so, you know, I think short of having this waste levy discussion tonight, it's in my memory one of the sort of most positive probably budget discussions based on consultation that I can remember. So, and that does reflect that, you know, we have kept a lid on rates. We have continued to do things. We have put money into areas that we've been, you know, told by residents it's important to them, and the core things that the council needs to do, we've funded. So, you know, I don't think we should be surprised by that. But that is really good. In regard to what we end up with the rates, I think it is. In a way, we've talked about, Councillor Davey asked the question, we're arguing over $7, and I mean that can be argued both ways, but I think it is symbolic that I think it needs to be clear. We would have been here 2.4, we'd have probably passed it about an hour and a half ago, but instead we've got an extra 0.4 that we've got to find from somewhere. It's got to come from somewhere. It's either got to come from the surplus. We've got to stop doing things, which I think we probably can't do now that number 2 has been passed, or it comes out of the surplus. I feel coming out of the surplus, we could do that, no question. If we went in with 800,000 surplus instead of $1 million, you know, the sky is not going to fall in. But the fact is that we were landed with a 200 grand bill that we just cannot avoid. We've got to pick up people's rubbish. We've got to take it to landfill. We can't avoid it. And we got landed with that a week and a half ago. And so while it is an average extra $7 to ratepayers, I actually think it is the right thing to do. It is the fact that we did have a budget that we argued over, and there was a lot of work put into that would have been 2.4 tonight. But then we've got an extra bill from 200,000 from the state government, a bill we can't avoid. So I really do think that 2.8 is the right percentage rate increase. The surplus is around $1 million, which I feel is the right thing to do. We went out with 965, around $1 million, and we are just over it. 2.8 is the right bit, so I think we should vote it up.
Yeah, look, I agree, and you should also consider the reason for our rate increase, or the reason why.
Councillor Abbs, you're seconding?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The reason why we went with, why the administration suggested, a rate increase. The way that we go about this is, what is our increased cost to business year on year? So when you go to a resident and you say, why have you increased my rates by this amount? Well, it's my increased cost to of the council doing business. And it's very clear to them then. You can say, these are all the factors which contributed, if they want to go into that detail. If we don't pass this on, next year, you're going to also lose this amount. And the year after, and the year after, ad infinitum, until you catch it back up again. And so what you're going to need to do next year or the year after is, and it might be a lot closer than $1 million, or it might be a lot closer than what we're sitting on at the moment, because there might be some other charge or something else that we want to consider about, is that then you have to increase it then, and then you have to explain it to your resident, well, why didn't you do it last time? So to my mind, it's actually very simple. We have a cost of business. We have an increased cost of business of 0.4, and we should increase it to that. Now, for our individual residents, it's not sheep stations. It is a small amount, but for us, it is a lot of money. It is a Pepper Street. It is a huge amount of money to us. And if you continually cut into that, it means that we're only setting ourselves up for failure in future. So I think we should go to the community with a very clear plan. We went out with, proposed rate increase, or, proposed surplus. That's essentially the surplus that we're going out for again. And to my mind, it's actually quite clear, and it's something that every single resident at the moment is aware of. Next year, not so much. Next year, if you say, oh, well, you remember that 0.4, well, now we're going to pass that on to you because we feel like it, and all of a sudden we're the highest rating council in South Australia. Things get a lot more complicated to then go and explain to your residents. So while it's a topical issue, while it's being debated, pass it on now and make it simple. My suggestion to you is, look, if you want to go for 2.8, if you want to go for 2.7 or 2.6, just pick either 2.8 or 2.4. So if you vote this down, then the alternative would be 2.4. But I recommend that you vote this up, as it's simple, it's easy to explain, everyone understands why it's happening, and we go out with a surplus that we then communicated to them, and we don't have to cut our services now or next year or the year after. So I commend 2.8 to you.
Councillor Hugh?
I think I've already mentioned this evening, I think it's, we've obviously gone through the fact that it's disappointing that essentially we're acting as a tax collector for the state government. And I think, we've gone to the community with that 2.4, whether it was this tax or another tax that the state government passed, it would be collected somehow. So unfortunately, we are just a revenue collector for the state government. I am torn because obviously we've gone to the community with 2.4, and I think people, the feedback is around responsible spending, and I think we still have the opportunity to do that over the year. And although Councillor Jones mentioned about the fact, well, let's just absorb it and encourage people to actually do the right thing with their bins, I actually think we haven't got people doing the right thing yet. So let's increase the rates to cover the costs that we're likely to have. And you know what? If we can spend the next year and invest time and money in getting people to do the right thing, it means that next year their rate increase can be less, and we can go forward then with a good news story around, look at the change in culture of our community in terms of waste management, and this is why our rates might be less than other councils. But I think we don't have people there yet, so I think to make that jump and just wear that cost at this point of time is probably a bit irresponsible. So, look, I think it's disappointing that we are where we are. I agree with Councillor Piggott. If we didn't have this 0.4, we'd probably just be sitting here passing the 2.4 that we'd all agreed on and we've worked hard over the last few months. So I think as much as it's disappointing to have to change what we've gone to the community with, I think the community understands. And hopefully they do, because we'll be sending out the notification with the rates and educating them on that and why we've got to this point, so it shouldn't be a surprise for anyone. But I think you know, let's see how we go for this year, see if we can invest that time and effort into changing waste management within our council area, and then hopefully next year we can go back with 2.4.
Councillor Hubel.
Yeah, well said, Councillor Hughes. I think the spirit of the budget is what was endorsed by the public, and I don't think we're compromising that by moving to 2.8. I think by moving to 2.8, we're keeping the spirit of the budget exactly as it was, and I think although raising the rates above what we said they were going to be, I think we're doing our best. It's our best stab, I guess, at keeping the status quo in terms of consultation. Again, I think this is it's a shame that the good work that's gone into preparing this budget is being overshadowed by talk of waste. But look, this is an associated issue which is facing nearly everything the council comes across, and that is the way we treat our environment and the role that climate change has on our day-to-day is just becoming more and more apparent. Around late last year, there was talk of fortnightly red bin collections, and the uproar was enormous. And we were in election mode there, so we're having a lot of conversations with a lot of people, and it was unpopular. No, we don't want that. Now, I think that speaks to the attitude that residents have towards the red bins. No, don't take away our red bins. We put things in them. But we've done auditing through East Waste. We know that a good amount of what goes in those red bins doesn't need to be going in there. We have a role to take leadership, and Burnside Council should be standing tall and proud and saying, this is what we can do to combat the harmful effects we're having on the environment. So, look, I think we go with 2.8. It's a shame that we have to, but I think it's the way to stay most loyal to our residents.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Mayor Moncey. Yes, I completely disagree. With respect, Councillor Hubel, absolute respect. Look, no, I do certainly understand the rationale that that everyone's sort of raising regarding the 2.8. My rationale to keep to the 2.4 is the economy of this country at the moment. I'm certainly very scared of those on fixed incomes. If two more decreases in the RBA's cash rate comes through, that's a bigger gap that those people on fixed incomes that have just got term deposits that they're living on that have just dropped 0.75% are trying to actually come up with their income. I just don't think this is the right time to be doing that. I think the $320,000 or $200,000 would be better out in the community, generating more income and a better economy for our ratepayers than it would be for us to be a tax collector for the state government. I don't think it's the right time to be the tax collector in this current economic climate. Every local government and state government and federal government need to play a role here. The RBA has just put their hand out and say, please help us, we can't do it by ourselves. I think as a local government we should do our little bit and not increase it by 0.4%. And that's our little bit. I know it's only $7 for each ratepayer, or $10 if you've got vacant land, but it all adds up at the end of the day, and that money ends up circulating in the economy, and that will only benefit our ratepayers in the long run. So I will be voting for a 2.4, not voting for this particular motion, and that's my rationale, and I can be completely on a different side of the fence there with you guys, but thank you.
Just a query, Mayor. I'll be going for 2.7, but I will have to vote this down. Right, okay. Again, I just want to make this point that we need to be true to ourselves. On page 22, again, and the residents can see this if they want to look at the 709 page or 790 page agenda, the net cost of business for 2019-20 is 2.7%. I know it's only a 0.1%, but Councillor Davis said it before, that the net cost of business is what we've been true to ourselves about. That's what we have talked about in our various workshops. It's a very small amount of money, but if we go to 2.8, we're actually putting in an extra 0.1% cost to our residents, above what we've been talking about all through our workshops, etc. So I know it's only a small one, but I will be, if this gets defeated, I'll be putting up 2.7.
Councillor Turnbull.
Well, actually, thank you, Mayor. That's actually what I was going to say. 2.7 or 2.6. I think we owe it to our ratepayers to subsidise this one, take it, absorb it, and I agree with Councillor Cornish about people on fixed incomes. There's a lot in this area who really can't afford too much more, and so I would be going for 2.6, maybe 2.7, but which are not here on this. Whether it's an amendment, I don't know, but definitely not the 2.8 for me. Thank you.
Councillor Lemon.
I'm still flashing green. Thank you. Yes, I'll be supporting this at 2.8, and the reason I'm speaking, because I sort of wasn't going to, but I totally disagree. I totally agree with the thrust of what Councillor Cornish has said. There are people on fixed incomes. It is awful that we're going down this path. What I disagree with is his methodology. To me, this is what Councillor Cornish is suggesting is that our big brother has trashed the joint and we're actually paying for the cleaners. That's essentially what's being said here, because somebody has to pay for the cleaners. Well, I don't agree with that. Our big brother has trashed the joint and the whole world's going to pay for it. But we're going to let the whole world know it's Big Brother that's trashed the joint, not us. And I think that's an important distinction to make. I don't think we should just be being compliant to a state government that hasn't consulted with us, as we have with our ratepayers, hasn't consulted with us, it's made a cash grab, it's got its own, and it's done it for the same reason. It's actually got no GST revenue that perhaps it was expecting. We are heading into a recession. Yes, we are. We are looking at the most phenomenally small returns on investment because of the interest rate cuts that we've had over a period of time. We're all after that, but we're not. We didn't make that hateful decision. We just have to deal with the consequences of it. And I think 2.8, it's a small amount, and it's something that we cannot put off forever. So we start now, while it's topical, we put a notice in we put a line in our rates saying why it's there, and I do believe we are still continuing with the spirit of our consultation. I agree with that.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't support 2.8%. We've gone out with 2.4% to the residents, expecting that, and there was only 30% in our survey that actually would have been happy with a rate increase. We're going to end up with a lot of dissatisfaction. I mean, imagine how hard it's going to be to communicate this change overnight, just like that. You know, why are we in such a rush to react to a waste levy? So, gosh, we've got to get more data. We've got to find out from East Waste, you know, what they're going on with about their bin RFD technology. We need more data from them and give them the sense of urgency. Give our subsidiary, you know, the hurry along. You know, instead of spending 6 months writing a report, get it done, please, in a couple of months, and get this strategy going so that the residents can see what they have to do to change their behaviour, if we can change behaviour, or what other measures we can take. Otherwise, we're just going to say, right, no sense of urgency, we're all right, we're comfortable. No, I totally disagree with this. If the worst case occurs, so what? We can just say, well, we tried. You know, it's not the end of the world if we bite into some operating surplus. So what? I'm totally against increasing the rates. We've gone out to the community, worked very hard on consultation, spent tens of thousands of dollars on consultation. And finally, we've talked about, oh, it's only $7, you know, a couple of coffees a week for, you know, here and there for some ratepayers. Well, actually, it isn't. It is not. The fact is, you were talking about averages, and nothing like using an average figure to make it sound better than it really is. If you look at what the outliers are on that bell curve, you'll find the facts are, if we get the facts, you'll find the facts are there are going to be some people really, really hurting from this 0.4% increase. That bell curve has got a bunch of people on either side of that average. They're not going to feel it at $7 or $10, they're going to feel $100. And they might be pensioners. We don't know. So we need the facts to understand the outliers. And so with that, please, we don't have to rush into increasing this to 2.8. We don't have enough data, and we need our subsidiary to work very hard, which I know they are, and they would be very willing to give us a strategy. It's going to be robust and fast. Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Last but not least, I think. A lot's been said tonight, but I have to say I endorse the 2.8% increase. I think we don't have any choice, as has been outlined very articulately. I think Councillor Hubel summed it up superbly in terms of our positioning in the environment and the work we've just got to do and keep on doing to support that and do it better. In terms of community consultation, which has just been raised, our community has accepted very well the 2.4% increase. 55% of respondents actually said, and this was a huge amount, as Councillor Piggott said, we had a really good response. 55% supported the 2.4%, 11% supported a greater increase if we could increase service levels or new projects and infrastructure. And we don't know what the community would say if we asked for their opinion about 2.8%. I don't think they would object based on the situation we find ourselves in with this sudden and really unplanned contingency that we face ourselves with. I do not, imposed by the state government, I do not think we have any other option but than to support a 2.8% increase, and I think our community will support this. So I'll be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Worship. A question to the administration. What percentage of our residents are on a hardship payment plan?
You just answer.
Through the Mayor, would take that on notice.
I suppose just a follow-up question or request is yeah, if we could get that information, but if that was to significantly increase, if there's anything worth reporting, would that come back to council?
Through the Mayor, we certainly can do that.
Do you wish to speak? All right, Councillor Jones.
We keep congratulating ourselves about the public consultation that 55% people were in favour of the 2.4% increase. The fact is, a third of people wanted a 0% increase, which everyone conveniently forgets, and they think we could save money by doing stuff more cheaply, more efficiently, and maybe cutting out some things they think we shouldn't be doing. So I was prepared to accept the 2.4 because that seemed to be the consensus we had, and that's what I think we should stick to. And we should say, we're just going to suck it up. I've suggested how we can in fact avoid paying this money. That's what I think we should do. I think we should also stop overpaying for fences. Now, that was one facetious example, but we spend a lot of money on capital expenditure. I'd be very interested to see whether we could in fact, through procurement practices, save some more money. So I'm going to vote against this. If someone wants to proposed 2.4, I will vote for that.
Right, I have no other names on this list. And I think everyone has spoken except Councillor Carbone, who you're not choosing to. So it goes back to Councillor Piggott.
It's a shame Councillor Carbone hasn't spoken, actually.
You miss my speeches.
I do miss your speeches, yeah. I just wanted to pick a few things up in regard to the debate. I mean, I just do need to pick up Councillor Henschke's issue around the averaging. It's true, an average can tell certain lies, but in this case, I mean, the $7 is the average. So anyone with a property less than average in Burnside will pay less than $7 because of the extra 0.4%, the bit we're arguing over. And I think someone to pay $100 extra would need to have a property worth something like $50 million. Now, we may have those in Burnside, we certainly don't have many, and I suspect I might be get a bit of support actually to charge them extra rates. So just picking up on that point. I think that's true. If I'm wrong, I'm happy someone tell me that I'm not, that I am. Sorry, I am wrong.
Probably was a better way to deal with it. Because everybody understood the explanation that you gave.
Right, thank you. In regard to Councillor Cornish, in doing our bit I feel actually we'd already done our bit. We actually debated about what rate increases were perhaps sensible in the current regime economically when we actually put the draft budget out. And it went out, and in fact, Councillor Jones is right, they didn't all agree with it, but a lot of them did agree with it, and they know all the facts the same as we do. So I think we're actually already doing our bit ahead of coming here and debating the extra 0.4. And so I think our bit was done when we went out with 2.4. We went out with savings of 1%. We certainly locked out a lot of projects actually that came of motions on notice and things that people wanted to do that we didn't go with. We've pared quite a lot of things back if you look at the long-term financial plan. So I think we've already stepped up to that plate. And then what's happened is the 0.4 has come through from the state government. And I do go back to the symbolism. It's not politics particularly. It's very easy to communicate. I think communication's very easy because people have been reading the paper for the last week. And what we're doing here is having a budget that was pretty much ready to go and then having an extra 0.4. So from that point of view, Councillor Dawes, if I could get him to vote for this, it would be great because I don't necessarily disagree with him, but I do think it just muddies the waters a bit. I think just going with something different probably just muddies the waters, and I think it's important not to do that here. So I think it is either 2.8 or 2.4. In fact, I don't. I think 2.4 would be a massive mistake. I think we should go with 2.8. So I ask for your support.
Right, those who are in favour of the 2.8, please raise your hands. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right, those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Division's been called. Councillor Lemon, Councillor Carbone, Councillor Hubel, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Davey, Councillor Piggott and Councillor Davis in favour. Those against? Councillor Cornish, Councillor Henschke, Councillor Jones, Councillor Dawes and Councillor Turnbull. The motion is carried. Did agree that we would move for the sake of the gentleman in the chamber. Sorry. Pardon?
Can I do the rest?
Oh, sorry, we've got to do the rest, yes. Apologies. It's kind of implied, but we do have to pass it. Yeah.
Is that right? 4 through to...
Yeah, 4 down.
We did 4 down. Yeah, we did.
I think it included it all, unless I'm wrong.
That was included.
Yeah, that included everything. All right, okay. So I was right. So I was right. I was right. Okay, so we will now move to 13.6, the portion of Waterfall Gully Burnside proposed road process. And I apologise it's taken so long, but it is important that we have moved this now. Can I have somebody who would like to move this motion, please? Or Councillor Dawes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Looking at page 575 for those who...
574.
Yeah.
So I remove that the report be received. Do you want me to read all of 1 to 7?
No. There's only emotions on those.
The main, just start with what's the purpose of this?
Yes, that the council approves the sale of the resultant portion of closed road to the owners of 2 Zenith Avenue, Burnside, the amount determined by a licensed valuer, plus all costs associated with the proposal subject to the successful completion of road process order being made as per resolution item above, which I didn't mention, and any conditions the CEO wishes or considers appropriate.
I think that's sufficient.
That's sufficient? Okay. Councillor Turnbull and I have been, it's in our ward, it's on the boundary of Beaumont and Burnside wards, if you don't know it. It's surprising to us this occurred a long time ago, in the 1990s, I think, and I'm very pleased that the new owner of this particular property has come forward and explained the circumstances. We've met with administration to understand it and see whether any other options were available, and we're now of the belief that what has been proposed to you tonight is the best way forward. It seems quite a substantial piece of land, about 229 square metres, and the idea here is that whatever the market value is, that amount will go into our open space fund for future decisions of council. I don't know what I can say much more. James is there in case I've missed anything, but that's all I can say. Thank you.
Councillor Lemon, you wishing to second this?
I am certainly wishing to second this. I think, and I too have come to the same conclusion. I read this report and I thought it was excellently done. And I particularly want to thank the owners for coming forward to sort this out for once and for all, forevermore. I think it's a brave thing to do and it's a sensible thing to do, and I thank you for that. And I'm very happy to support this.
Councillor Carbone.
Sorry, Your Worship, I meant to jump in earlier but I didn't get a chance. I'd like to declare a perceived conflict of interest. That is, a friend of mine is involved in this property, but I will be staying and voting.
Thank you for that declaration. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question. Did we at all, through you to the staff, did we get any sort of idea of the valuation of the property? I'm a bit concerned about that we've got no idea of what must be considerable worth of this piece of land.
Through the Chair, we haven't had a valuation done yet, but our process would be to go to an independent valuer and get them to value the land, and that's the price that we would use.
Sorry, it has to go to Councillor Turnbull next, and then it will come back to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm actually opposed to the privatisation of any council land, but I agree to this one quite reluctantly because there doesn't seem to be any other safe or sensible way to go forward with the problem. And having looked at the land, it would only be really useful for the local goats and sheep in the area because it is very, very steep and stony. If it had been a flat piece of land, I would have chained myself to it and said no. But as it is, I support this reluctantly. Thank you.
Was that new in the 60s?
Now, Councillor Davey.
My other question was, is the any proposal for the land to be developed? Is the house likely to be demolished, or these accoutrements likely to be demolished? And are all the trees to be saved, or are they proposed to be lopped? Thanks.
Through the Chair, to our knowledge, there's not currently any development applications that have been lodged for the property. So as far as we're aware, there's not currently plans for any development there. And same for the trees. There's no current proposals to remove any trees on the site.
Sorry, thank you, Mayor. The current, I guess now, size of the allotment, does that open that property up to subdivision in terms of its size?
Let me find it.
Kennedy answer that.
Through the chair, yes, at item 27, we've outlined that particular concern. There's, in accordance with the Development Act at the moment, the size of the block isn't sufficient to allow subdivision. So even with that additional land, that's still the case.
Thank you. Look, I had similar feelings to Councillor Turnbull about disposing of council land. I'm in support of this motion to put everyone at ease. Although I am wary of, I guess, setting a precedent. I think this is a particular case, and I think everything adds up, and that selling it off is the right thing to do. But in this, I guess, this time of valuing our land and valuing our public space, excellent, I guess, research, as has been done in this case, is something we should always make sure we're vigilant about when it comes to public land.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Mayor Monceau. Similar to Councillor Carbone, I will declare a perceived conflict of interest in this matter. My rationale is I went to school with the proprietor's son. I know that's probably a very vague and very one, but they always say to better be safe than not. So I will declare it. I will stay in the room. I'll discuss, and I will vote on the motion as well.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I too have great reservations about selling off a piece of public land, but I recognise the errors that council has made over the years, and the fact that development was allowed without checking the proper. Historically, this is no reflection on any current staff, but that we historically didn't manage this site well. So I reluctantly will support the motion tonight. And I look forward to being advised of the huge amount of money that will go into our open space fund, so we can buy some more land. But yes, normally I wouldn't like or support selling off public land.
Councillor Jones.
Sorry, I just had a query based on what Councillor Dawes said. I'm reading the report and it says the owners bought it in 1983. So Councillor Dawes said the new owners. So they actually bought it in 83. So because I looked at this and I thought it was okay, but this was niggling with me last night when I was trying to get to sleep. The encroachment was brought to our client's attention when they came across a historical site survey dating back to 1999, which is after they'd owned the property for 16 years. So who did the historical site survey?
Yeah.
Because, who would do a survey other than the owners of the property?
Good question, but I don't think anyone can answer that.
Yeah.
Including the owner of the property.
So you see where I'm going is they've actually known this for 20 years.
I believe from the report that they were not aware for that 20 years.
So who did the survey? There's Scooby-Doo movement here.
Through your worship, there may be several reasons why a survey was done at the time, and the owners may or may not have known at that time that they were encroaching on land. The information that you have in your report is the information that's been provided to us, and it's my understanding that the owners, regardless of how long they've known about it, are looking to right that wrong from that period of time, and they have approached us, and our recommendation is that we proceed.
I don't have any other names on here, so it goes back to Councillor Dawes. Okay, those in favour, please. Those against, I think that was unanimous, carried unanimous. I'm seeking a motion to have a slight break at this point in time, but I also point out that when we restart, it will be 5 to 10, so that's about a 7-minute break, and you'll be moving to extend time possibly in that time.
Be on time.
So, did we have a motion move?
You need to move.
We need a movement. Move for. Yeah, I think we got enough. Those in favour, yes, carried. Thank you. Numbers sitting around the been informed by administration that we must get on to 13.4 and 13.5 must be done tonight. So I'm going to do them in that order. So can I have someone who wishes to speak, to move the motion for 13.4? Councillor Cornish?
Happy to move as printed.
Move as printed. Seconded Councillor Davey. Is anyone?
Davis.
Sorry, Davis. Apologies. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on it, or you? Okay, no one speaking. So therefore, we move the motion. Put the motion. Those in favour of 13.4. Those against? Carried. Everyone actually voted. Okay, 13.5, draft asset management plans for consultation. I'm looking for a name on the... Councillor Cornish.
I'm happy to move in accordance with the officer's recommendation.
And seconded by Councillor Lemon.
Yes, I'm happy to second that. And thank you for that enormous amount of work, but I don't thank you for the amount of reading.
To include that in the motion.
Can I just say that I appreciate Councillor Lemon's comment, but I think it needs to be done a little less hastily than that. And while I appreciate the sentiments, I think there has been a huge amount of work in it. I think the staff should be very, very... So I think the staff should be very, very proud of what they have put together. It is clear, it is concise, it's consistent from one section to the next. And I think they've done an outstanding job on putting this work together. So, okay. Absolutely commend the work. It's been fantastic. Everybody that's been involved, like from the bottom up. Okay. So I'll put the motion. No. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Sorry, Councillor Piggott, you did have your name on there and I jumped in ahead of you. I apologise.
You did, Mayor, you did. I had pressed my button.
Only because I was afraid it was going to happen and it'll be...
You should have a little more faith with the chamber, I think, because really I've got nothing to add. I've got nothing to add apart from it is an enormous piece of work. It does present very well. It is all those things the Mayor said, and yeah, the administration should be very proud of it.
Councillor Henschke?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to emphasise in our strategic plan the enhancement and restoration of heritage and our heritage assets. and I'm happy to see that the word heritage appears 22 times in the asset management plans, and I want to ensure that everything we do, from curbing to the colour of the concrete used in the precast elements in curbing, is done with all this in mind. And I only saw some in Eastwood yesterday when I was helping people drop off flyers. Some beautiful concrete curbing elements, precast ones, that were replacing missing concrete curbing. So I'm very, very glad to see this appearing 22 times, and that it will be part of everything we do. Thank you.
Moving to extend till 10:30, seconded by Councillor Hughes. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Right, looks like unanimous. No, sorry, was it? Okay, thank you. I didn't see against. All right. It was carried to move to continue to 10:30. All right. Yes, I know. I'm about to do that. Okay, so there's no one else on my screen, so it does go back to the mover, Councillor Cornish, I believe. You're happy to put? Okay, so those who are in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. Those against, believe it's unanimous. Carried unanimously. I'm going to go to back to 13.2 now. Councillor Davis, you are moving that one, and Councillor Davey is seconding. So those in favour, those against, carried. The update of the operational risk register, then Stephen Smith can go home. Okay. Councillor Lemon? Yes, I'm happy to move. Moving it, seconded by Councillor Davey. Those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Portion of Waterfall Gully we've done. 13.7, the fence options for 39 May Terrace, Kensington Park. Councillor Davey, you wish to speak on this?
Yes, so in line with the motion that the report be received, that the administration proceed with the proposed installation of, I reckon it should be the one, don't you? The low decorative tubular style fence. And that this be accompanied by tree plantings along the perimeter. You reckon plantings? Well, we want to hide the fence. Tree plantings along the perimeter to soften. Not trees. Plantings. Okay, well, I'll delete trees. Plantings along the perimeter.
Sorry, Julian.
To soften the landscape. In consultation with, who do we need to consult with? The plantings. Local EMs.
No.
Oh, I want to be involved. Yeah, with local EMs. Well, because we get cop all the flack. So soften the landscape in consultation with local councillors. That's my motion. So we've heard tonight the input from the residents. We are aware that we're doing some work down the track to upgrade the management plan for the whole area. But the areas to be managed are the Regal, of course cinema, the Hula Hoop and Gardens and that area, which is operating as its own successful small business. And then adjacent to that is the house, which has its storage area, and it's actually used as a dressing room for functions that are held at the Regal Theatre as well. It's a general all-purpose little facility. It's also used for parking, so the locals would like it screened a lot better and softened. They're not very happy with the utilitarian fences that have gone up, which is fair enough, and so they'd really like some soft plantings around to soften all of that and make it a lot greener and softer and cooler. So hopefully you'll support this motion. Thank you. Do you agree with that?
I will second the motion, and I don't think I need to say anything else, do I? I feel like, no, I feel like we've obviously heard from Chris this evening, and it is an important part of our ward. Hula Hoop and the Regal do add a lot of value to the local community. It's an area that a lot of people visit. I think this is an important part of, keeping, and I think Chris spoke about the transition between the two areas. And I think this is, this is obviously why it's come to the table, and it is an important part, and just something to make sure that it fits in with this streetscape of the area.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Mayor Monceau. Yes, just a question. Obviously, during the deputation tonight, it was raised that perhaps no fence at the front would actually be, desirable by the residents. Mr. Shanks obviously said, you build a fence for a particular reason. I just wondered, do we have a particular reason for this property that we need to actually build a fence and it can't be a row of, lavender or something?
Through your worship, we are responding to a council resolution that said that a report be brought back to council addressing the old street fencing be replaced with appropriate fencing that maintains the streetscape and character of the property. So other than council direction, no, we don't have to.
Thank you. Well, I won't be voting for this motion. It was clear to me tonight that the local resident would prefer plantings rather than a fence. If this motion doesn't happen, I'll just be moving for a hedging planting being installed along the front of 39 May Terrace, in line with the requests that we've received tonight.
Councillor Piggott.
Could I have a question to administration, if I may? Could I just clarify, the question was asked by the deputy around the overall plan for, I guess, that property, Hula Hoop, Regal, car park, etc. Am I right? Is that the plan that's on foot?
Through the chair, that's correct. So, as I think we've communicated back to council a few times, we're updating the conservation management plan for the site. And we've asked the heritage architects we've got on board to consider both Regal as well as the broader property, so May Terrace and the garden area as well. The plan will cover sort of conservation of the existing building, but we've also asked them to separate out future enhancement opportunities. And so hopefully that, once we've got a copy of that, that will give us some direction about what we might like to use that site for moving forward. And obviously that'll all come back to council and there'll be a chance for people to input to that as well. So the short answer is yes, we're working on a bigger plan for the area. And we're just not quite there yet.
Likely timing?
Through the chair, probably within the next 6 months or so.
Right, and then presumably if we did want to do stuff, we would need budget, which is probably next financial year. Right, okay. I'll speak to it. That's good. I mean, I think it is an area crying out for being looked at. I think the deputation was right in that, looked at in a holistic way, and certainly the car park and this house brings it down a bit. And although it was good to hear that the locals thought things had picked up at Regal, which is obviously our observation as well. So I do think it is right, though. We had to get the report in the first place, there was a good argument put up that we needed to put a fence there. Deputation might have said that he didn't want a fence, but, you know, he was a deputation. And so I think the report's clear. It's got a reasonably inexpensive option for a fence, so I support it.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a question for the administration because I read the report, but nowhere in the report can I see how the option was selected, and was the development of the choice in fencing guided by, and I see here the Heritage Conservation Document, Fences in South Australia, Department of Environment, Natural Resources, Principles to Follow, Guiding Notes, Guideline Notes, published a few years ago. And do we use these guideline notes whenever we need to invest in new fencing? Because it's quite a comprehensive guideline note, and I hope if we don't have it in our policy, I'd like to see it in our policy. Thank you.
Quibbling about? I'm just pleased we can remove the fence.
Through your worship, the short answer is no. The report talks about the reasons why the fences were chosen, to be sympathetic to the character of the street and to be sympathetic to the property itself. But the bottom line is it's not a heritage listed property, so we don't have to refer to that, that guideline that you're referring to.
Councillor Davey.
I have a question, a follow-up question. In relation to the Conservation Management Plan, I hadn't realised it was quite as well developed as it apparently is. When will we be involved in the draft, please, through you to the staff?
Through the chair, we haven't seen anything back yet either. We've engaged some heritage consultants. They're doing their initial research, evaluation, etc. So as soon as we've got a starting point back, then we'll be looking to involve council in that conversation. So will we workshop that? Potentially.
Councillor Jones.
I think we should wait for the plan. I'm alarmed that we're going to build a very expensive fence and then rip it out in 6 months' time when we have the plan, which is what this report is suggesting might happen. I think for the sake of 6 months, we've got, you know, Mr. Shakes is quite a vocal neighbour around that area. He doesn't seem too concerned to have a fence. I think we should save the money. So I would be voting probably to defer for 6 months and see what council administration come up with, and then I'd be delighted to reconsider.
Right, there's no one else here on the list, so Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for your input. As we heard tonight, I think Chris Shakes was happy that if we did put a fence in, it could be removed down the track so that you know, any other sort of renovations or changes that were necessary were easily accommodated, and I think that tubular fence does suit that. There does need to be some fencing that is sympathetic to a lot of the other fencing that's around the area. The main thing we need to do is get some plantings there. It's been so neglected in terms of its garden and landscaping. It's used also, as I said, by the staff who use the hula hoop, and I think they would like it, you know, fenced and looking more presentable. The residents want the streetscape to look more presentable, so I think this is a start. I think that as we've heard, the Conservation Management Plan is only going to be developed in the next coming months, and that's going to take ages to actually get implemented. So we really need to actually do something now and start the planting as soon as we can in the growth season. So hopefully you'll support this and we can just get something underway to tidy it up and make it more presentable. Thank you.
Right, those in favour, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those against?
Sorry.
Right. The motion's carried.
Councillor Cornish voted twice.
Those who were in favour of it, please stand. Councillor Davis, Councillor Piggott, Councillor Davey, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Hubel, Councillor Dawes and Councillor Lemon. Did you get that, Rob? And those against, Councillor Carbone, Councillor Turnbull, Councillor Jones, Councillor Henschke and Councillor Cornish. Right, we move on to subsidiaries. East Waste Management Authority, a motion to accept, please. Yep. Councillor Cornish, in accordance with the officer's report, and seconded Councillor Davis. All those in favour? Carried. And I've lost the last page. Eastern Health Authority, there is nothing, thank you. Nothing from Highbury, nothing from Era Water or Eastern Regional Alliance. Mayor's report on page 719. I also have put in your pigeonholes a copy of 2 reports that I have written on the Planning Institute of Australia conference that I attended on the, I think it was the 18th of June, and a copy of my report that I wrote in relation to the conference interstate, the National Conference of Local Government Association. I've put a copy of in each of your pigeonholes, and all of the leadership team have received copies as well, because there are some issues in there that came up, particularly in relation to planning and planning for our future. That will have implications for us when we start our new strategic plan. And they will be part of the agenda in the next council meeting. And I know that the acting CEO is also writing up something to go in his report at the next meeting, for the next council meeting, in relation to his perspectives on the national conference. Next one was reports from members, delegates and working parties. Move the sorry, yes, we need to remove a report. Thank you, Councillor Davis, and seconded Councillor Hughes. And reports from members, delegates. Oh, sorry, got the motion. My back's aching. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, thank you. I think it was unanimous. Carried unanimously. Now it's reports of members, delegates and working parties. Thank you very much. Anything additional to be added apart from what has already been sent in? Councillor Hughes.
Can I just add to mine that I also attended the Burnside Historical Society Year 7 projects on the 20th of May.
Thank you.
Other than that, as is.
Council correspondence, we have none as that I'm aware of. Other business, I believe Councillor Turnbull.
Firstly, I wish to acknowledge that Councillor Jones and Hubel have allowed me to share this bit of Burnside Council good news story from a club in their ward, but to which I belong. The Beaumont Bowling Club was made Bowls South Australia's Club of the Year for 2018 to 19 because it was considered by an independent panel that the club had made the most significant contribution to the growth of bowls and the involvement of the community across the state. Specifically, over the last 4 years, the club has increased the number of women bowlers playing pennants. We now have 30 plus women in the club, which has gone against all trends. The club has a very successful bowling record, having a side winning a premiership every year for the last 5 years. The club has dramatically changed its facilities by modernising and updating the toilets, kitchen and lounge and bar area. The club is in the process of finishing the hall area, and this has been done through extensive fundraising, grants and some support from the council. The club has emphasised over the last 4 years that involving the community is an integral part of the club's activities. The club is now used on a weekly basis by 250 bridge players over 3 days and a church group of approximately 100. On a monthly basis, our facilities are used by 2 provost groups. We're also hiring our facilities for a whole range of functions, particularly for charity groups. For example, the recent weekend saw 100 plus university students hiring out the facilities, plus the Multiple Births Association conducting a quiz night. The club has also been able to change its financial situation through the work of numerous volunteers in the club. So I say congratulations to President Leonie Trimper who's pulled that club up by the bootstraps, and the many active, dedicated volunteers of the Beaumont Bowling Club. Good news story. Thank you.
And can I add that I have written to the president of the club and congratulating them on their award and their recognition of the service to the community.
Thank you.
Councillor Henschke.
Yep, thank you, Mayor. Other business is that the Community Alliance that I joined has now started a campaign in the Eastern Adelaide area, and thousands of flyers have been letterboxed in the last few days over the weekend, and be aware that your members, your ratepayers may be approaching you regarding these flyers, and it's from the National Trust about the contributory items that are at risk, and that's complementing the press release by the Mayor of Nord St Peters, who has stated in the media release that, amongst other things, that these contributory items are at risk, and you can read that media release. It was sent out in May. So just letting you know, to expect some activity from your residents and ratepayers.
Councillor Lem.
Yes, I'd like to extend my condolences to Karishma, who's not with us tonight because she's had a recent bereavement, and also my thanks for her watching this tonight and sending information and still working even in her absence, and I for one am very, very grateful for that and would like to thank her.
Right. Number 19 is confidential items. I don't know, there's 5 minutes. They're going to have to do an extension of time.
They will.
So do I do that before I depart?
Can you do it, Alan? There's no harm in doing it, Alan.
You can do it now if you want.
Well, it's 7 minutes according to me.
If they're...
We'll deal with it. Okay.
Can I move that we extend to 11 o'clock, please?
Seconded by Councillor Hughes. Those in favour? Okay, good. Those against? All right, I declare, confidential items, I declare a material conflict of interest, and I will be departing the chamber. And I will not be returning, so someone else can, whoever takes over from me can close the meeting.
I'd like to declare a perceived conflict of interest in relation to this matter. Under section 73. I think it's perceived. Oh, and I'll leave the chamber and not vote on it. So.
Okay, members, with the Mayor leaving the chamber, I would like to call nominations for an acting presiding member, please. Call for nominations. Councillor Davey.
I nominate Councillor Hubel.
Councillor Hubel, do you accept?
Who is interested in being chair?
Councillor Hubel does not accept.
Thank you.
Any other nominations, please? Councillor Lemon.
I'll nominate Councillor Dawes.
Councillor Dawes, do you accept? Councillor Dawes does not accept. Any other nominations? Councillor Cornish, do you accept?
Well, I did it last time. I think everyone should get a chance. So no, I don't accept. I'll leave it up to someone else to have a go.
Any other nominations?
Councillor Jones.
Councillor Jones.
Haven't had a go yet at all.
Councillor Jones, do you accept?
No, I don't feel competent.
Okay. Any other nominations? If I don't, Councillor Piggott, Councillor Hughes, do you accept?
Will I get help?
We will.
Acting Chief Executive up there, what more do you want?
Yeah, all right, look, I'll give it.
Before you do, Councillor Hughes.
I need to get voted in.
So Councillor Piggott is nominating and moving Councillor Hughes to sit as the acting presiding member. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Hughes? Councillor Hubel. Well, Councillor Hubel is who I saw first, so I apologise for that, Councillor Davey, it was you. All those for? All those against, please come and take the seat. Thank you, former Acting Presiding Member Cornish.
Good on you, Dolly. So how many of us are left? So there's
Okay.
10. So it's pretty straightforward.
Do we have anyone? Oh, we need to move into confidence first. So will someone move the motion to move into confidence? Oh, Jones, you are on.
Do we have to move into confidence? Okay.
I'm happy to move. Sorry, did it come to me? Yep.
Yep.
Sorry.
Councillor Piggott.
Do you want me to read it?
Do we have to read it? No, that's fine.
I'm happy to move as read.
Seconder. Councillor Cornish is on as a seconder on my chipboard.
And I'll speak to it if there is going to be a talk about it, and I'll wait for Councillor Piggott. Thank you, Councillor Piggott. I'll speak to it. The reason I think we do definitely need to go into confidence is that we are still partially through this process. This isn't the end of these items, and I don't believe you should muddy the waters of putting it out into the public. It'd be like going out to the public halfway through procurement. It's not done. You keep it in-house until you've got a result at the end of the day. And that's why this still needs to stay in confidence, and that's why I'll be voting for this motion, because this will not be done at the end of it. If you think whatever the motion comes out, you can vote to release it at the end of the day, but you need to protect it while it's happening in the process. So I'm definitely voting for this motion to go into confidence as it stands.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Jones.
I'm going to vote against it going to confidence, because I think the ratepayers of Burnside need to see what they're spending, what we are spending their money on. And we're spending a lot of money on legal fees for, I would suggest, very little purpose. And they deserve to see, given that we've just voted for a 2.8% rate increase, where their money is going.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? We'll vote on the motion. Oh, do you want to write a reply? No? Okay. We will put it to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The vote is carried. So we will now move into confidence.